for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We could have the reading of the mission and vision, please.
The mission statement is that Richmond Community Schools guide students on pathways of learning to a future of limitless possibilities.
And the vision statement, Richmond Community Schools, a community nurturing mind, body, and spirit to prepare students for lives of choice, purpose, and service.
Thank you both. Moving on to item 2, celebrations. Dr. Wright.
President Weber, trustees, I ask that Mrs. Bridget Hazelbaker, our communications specialist, approach the podium for tonight's celebrations. Mrs. Hazelbaker.
Hold on, I gotta post this at our
And as we know, with a few folks on vacation and the scheduling this meeting, we're pulling together and making it all happen. So thank you, Mrs. Hazelbaker.
You're welcome. Just wanted to again celebrate Richmond High School Band and Doublettes had a great camp last week at Richmond High School. I just want to give you all some updates of maybe some dates that they'll be competing. On July 16th, they'll be competing at the Centerville Archway Classic. On Friday, July 22nd, they'll be performing at Jay County. On Saturday, July 30th, the drums will be at Winchester. And then Friday, August 5th, is the Indiana State Fair. So getting real excited about seeing our students. And some people that live just on the other side of the gorge probably are hearing the drums all the time. And anybody else hearing around town when they're out and about? I know I do. So so we just want to wish them all good luck and had a great camp last week.
And so, Mrs. Hazelbaker, before you retreat back, as I understand, our state championship seasons of 88 and 73. 73 and 88. And so if you can just share the tradition that has been maintained with our RHS band.
So our students, I don't know if the delegates do it too, but anyway, the students collect the 1973 penny
All band students.
and the 1988 penny. So if you happen to see any of those in your cluster of coins, the students are collecting those. They're also looking for the 2022, but they will paint those red and white, and they'll put an R on those, and then the students wear them in their shoes on State Fair Day. So for good luck. So it's just to remember the class of 73. I mean, in 73 when they won State Fair, in the class of 88. So my husband was in the band in 88 when they won State Fair, and he still has his pennies. So that's just another little thing the band is doing for us. So just look at your penny jars for us.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Hazelbaker.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Stevens has joined us via phone.
Yes, I have. By the way, I'm proud to say that I was the drum major of that band for several years, and a marching instructor that actually helped to accept that trophy, that state championship trophy in 1988.
Congratulations with it. Did you indeed have the 1973 pennies in your shoes?
No, I had the 76, 77, and 78 pennies in my shoes, but I do have authentic 1973 penny that was worn in the shoe of one of my relatives.
What's rather remarkable about this is that you hear about superstitions and other traditions, but to be able to pay homage to those who had come before you all, and to know that our students still maintain that to this day is, I believe, just another mark of what it is that we're all still collectively doing in good standing. And I recall Michael Jordan used to wear his North Carolina shorts under his game shorts as a way to lead him to championships. And so hopefully these pennies will add up and be another great mark for our all right, President Weber.
Moving to, I think, Ms. Hazelbaker, moving on to public commentary. Do you have any folks signed up? All right. Moving on to item 4, presentation. Dr. Wright.
President Weber and trustees, I'm going to ask that Mrs. Jennifer Oliver Brady, a representative with the NIET, National Institute for Excellence in Teaching. This is an initiative that has been underway now for, I believe, 2 years here in Richmond Community Schools. Dennis Middle School, along with Fairview Elementary School, have been identified as a state, identified by the state as 2 institutions that are, at this particular point, in need of assistance and support. And so with the NIET initiative, that is indeed what has occurred. And so Mrs. Oliver Brady, we asked that she come and introduce and present and share that much more information about the NIET framework as to what exactly it is, what definitely it is not, and most importantly, answering all questions that you all may have as this particular initiative has proven to be very successful, not only here in RCS in many respects, but also around the state and around the country. Of course, with any new initiative and such proposals, there are questions, and so ideally we ask that Mrs. Oliver Brady join us. So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you
She has a
very much.
PowerPoint presentation.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, members of the board, for having me here too. I'll be succinct, I promise. I have a few slides to show you, and then just a couple of little handouts at your spots as well for future reference. I drove over from Indianapolis today without getting stuck in traffic, so already this is off to a better start. I wanted to just share a little bit about my background. I work, as you know, for a national organization, but my roots are here in Indiana. I served as a teacher for many years in the Indianapolis area, and then also as a school leader and teacher leader in the Indianapolis area as well. And something that I learned in my early years of teaching was that the systems and structures in place often did not allow teachers to do their very best and to thrive. And that's what really attracted me to the work of NIET, because I knew we had to do better for our teachers. And this work is all rooted in how we can establish systems for teachers to thrive at a higher level and to feel more supported. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you a little bit about our organization today. I would like to start with our mission and vision, which I heard your mission and vision earlier, and I saw it on the wall here when we were doing some collaboration a few weeks ago, and I think it should be noted that our missions and visions have some similarities. As you can see, our mission and vision up here on the screen. I'll just give you a little 5 minutes to glance, not 5 minutes, how about 5 seconds? 5 seconds to glance at it. But our mission really is around building educator excellence. We know that teachers and school leaders that support them can be the difference makers for kids. And so we want to support them through our work to make sure that all students have the opportunity for success. And I see that students are also at the heart of your mission and vision. So I think that makes our partnership, as it's growing, one that works nicely together. We believe that all students should be taught by an excellent teacher and supported by effective leaders at all levels. That's often not the case in our schools, and it's our commitment that we, as a matter of equity, want to allow for and help establish the right systems and protocols and structures and tools and opportunities for all educators to thrive so that all students can succeed. So a little bit about us very briefly, who we are, who we're not. We've been around for about 20 years, a little over now. We have partnerships all over the nation, many here in Indiana, about 20 school districts, and also a couple of institutions of higher education. We're a nonprofit organization. You can see up here on the screen, we're a recognized national leader in educator support and coaching and training. We are not I always tell people we're not a program, we're not a curriculum, we're not an assessment system, we're none of those things. We're really a partner with you in whatever makes sense to help your schools thrive and your students be successful. We've poured in as a big part of our work around the concept of teacher leadership, and you can see a little stat up here on the screen how we have helped elevate the role of teachers as leaders to serve alongside school principals, because the work of improving instruction and supporting all students and their various needs is really too complex for one person named principal to do alone. So I'll speak to that in just a minute too, but we very much value teachers and their contributions to instructional leadership in our work. We've seen how that can really be successful. And we also work, we're in a bit of a crisis here in education with teacher shortages and making sure that we have a strong pipeline of teachers to serve in our schools, and that we've tackled that need head on as well. It's all very interconnected, but that is some aspect of our work too. So a little bit about our work in general, but also here in Richmond. I wanted to just start off the bat by telling you a little bit about what we've been working toward here in Richmond, and some quotes from some of your educators that speak to their experiences so far with our partnership. You know, as I mentioned, we've got some real challenges out there in our educational systems across the nation, and I'm sure you feel it here too. The pandemic has presented unprecedented times and challenges socially, emotionally, academically for our teachers, for our students. These are problems that we're all trying to face, and we have some proven approaches that have worked. First, establishing those instructional leadership teams and empowering and setting our sights on and prioritizing deep dives into what works for kids in the classroom, and supporting them in all sorts of ways, including socially and emotionally. As I mentioned before, elevating teachers as leaders so that teachers are supported. They have that go-to person all the time that helps support them and lead them and do that complex thinking of teaching and supporting students on a daily basis. And establishing structures for professional growth. It's a complex act to deliver high-quality instruction to students each and every day and support their every need. And so teachers need time, dedicated time to learn from one another. And so we don't drop in and do a bunch of training for teachers. We help them elevate the best practices that are working at their school, shine a bright light on those, and try to scale them across a school, but that takes time. And so having that dedicated time for ongoing professional growth and learning and increased support is something that we've been working toward here with Fairview and Dennis over the last several months. So what does that look like, or what's been the perception of that work here at Fairview and Dennis in particular? I wanted to share with you some quotes that I found really inspirational and powerful that were collected, without any sort of prompt or frame. So just a few that I thought, speaking to you from your educators, here's a couple that I thought might resonate with you in terms of this work before we go any further. I thought this was powerful. We want to meet the needs of all students by focusing on student work and leveraging their strengths. We very much believe in a strengths-based approach. Everything we do at NIEP starts with the strengths, and then how do we grow those strengths, including that focus on what we see in student learning, student work, and what that tells us about student learning. And it really is about teacher growth to support student growth. Another one that popped up in our conversations was this one. Just give you 5 seconds to skim. This is from one of your teachers who has been also had a bit of a leadership role in her school, but this has changed her and has allowed her to step out of her comfort zone and find new ways to support all students. Another one here. We offer structures that allow local teams to make decisions. We don't tell folks what to learn. We help them, guide them toward what the data is telling them, but ultimately it's empowering the educators within a school system, within a school building, to make those decisions and equipping them with tools and structures and protocols that will help them do their work efficiently as possible and with the greatest impact on student learning. So I got one more, but I'm gonna save it till the end. And I wanted to just share with you kind of big picture what we believe. All that is kind of from the heart testimony from your educators. But in terms of, many of you I know work in the business community, and we believe we have a theory of action around this work, and you probably can make some connections. But if you kind of move your eyes to the right side of this screen, these are the outcomes that we want for your students here in Richmond. Your success is really our success. We want your schools to be structured for success so that teachers feel supported, students feel supported, leaders feel supported. We want to make sure that teachers are equipped with the right tools and time to collaborate so that they have the best shot at delivering the highest quality of classroom instruction as possible. We want to make sure that educators are retained
We know that's a very big need these days, and we've seen that intensify with the pandemic. So how can we make sure that teachers are feeling supported and they have time to collaborate and learn and grow and thrive within their schools so that they never want to leave? One of our partners in the Indianapolis area is Perry Township School District on the kind of south side of Indy. And the superintendent there, Pat Mape, says, once teachers are here in Perry Township, they don't want to leave. They're not on an island, and they have support from teacher leaders who will help them with whatever they need. So they've seen a remarkable increase in their ability to retain teachers as a result of working with us over the years. And then ultimately, we want to grow student achievement, just like your goals, your board goals suggest as well. So that's what we're all about, but how do we get there? Now we can move our eyes kind of back over to the left side of the screen. This is sort of what we believe in terms of our theory of action. We believe it first starts with clear expectations and goal setting, both at the district level, looking at your vision and mission and your goals, but also bringing that down to the school level and allowing and supporting school leaders and teacher leaders to work together to establish a strong vision for what success looks and sounds like. Also prioritizing instructional excellence. Teachers are the difference makers for kids. How do we prioritize instruction and be a learning organization that values the time needed and the complexity of thinking and the expertise needed to design high quality lessons so that all students can be successful? That means alignment of things such as our standards, our curriculum, our instructional practices, the feedback we provide, what we learn from an observation in a classroom. This part in the center is also a core piece of our work, growing capacity, being a learning organization so that we're all continuing to learn and grow. I know when I was learning to be a teacher, things have changed dramatically. The world has changed, students have changed, our expectations have changed, the economy has changed. So being able to continue to grow and learn and having this dedicated time to do that and in a way that's meaningful and relevant to our students and our students' needs is critical to this initiative and to our work. And then also, as we mentioned before, developing and sustaining structures like dedicated time within the school day for teachers to collaborate and learn with one another, for an instructional leadership team to come together with teachers represented and school leaders to do the work of setting the vision and monitoring success toward established goals. So that's a lot of words, but this is our work in a nutshell and what we believe and what we support school districts and schools individually to accomplish. We've been doing this for many years, and it's through our training, our support, our coaching, our resources that all of this you see on the screen can be made a reality. So in terms of what is next for our partnership for Richmond, we've been in lots of collaborative talks, and we're still trying to figure out, what is the right next step. But some things that we have decided for you all is that we know we will continue to talk, and opportunities like today for continued questions and answers to be discussed. We have some training that we've both delivered already, but we'll continue to deliver this summer to kind of anchor some of the work so that some of your school leaders are ready for new ways of thinking about their work and their practice for the 22-23 school year. We did some training last month in this very room, in fact, on our teaching and learning standards framework, and had some really in-depth conversations that day. I remember distinctly one of your principals saying, regardless of what happens with this partnership, I know that I am a better school leader as a result of the days I spent in this training, and that touched me, and I left this room on the final day of training with that in my heart and in my mind, because that was a powerful statement. We're also thinking about some training a little later this month. I had to think about what month it was for a minute. We've turned the calendar to July. A little later this month around our structure for professional learning for teachers. We often call them cluster meetings, and then that structure of an instructional leadership team. And then we're continuing to think about what is the right fit for a partnership for 22-23 and what we might do to serve your district and support your schools. So that's kind of where we are at this point in time. I wanted to end with this quote that I thought was very powerful also. This is one from one of your teachers, and I'll just give you about 5 seconds to skim this. I was struck by this. I thought it really spoke to the heart of this work, and it is. I believe all teachers have in their hearts and their minds the best intent for students, but sometimes the needs are so complex they're just not sure what to do next. What's the right next step? So having the structured time and support doesn't just help students, but also helps teachers believe and feel maybe reinvigorated and inspired to know that they can, in fact, make that difference for kids that they have in their hearts. And by fostering that environment, strengthening the type of environment where they come to school every day to teach their students, but also to learn and grow collaboratively with one another, leads to success, as the last piece there says. I couldn't help but highlight it in yellow, success for all. So I wanted to end on that positive and inspirational note, but wanted to see also at this time, Dr. Wright and members of the board, if you had any questions or if I could share any additional information at this time.
Mr. Stevens, are you still there with us, sir?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can. And I'm not sure if, when indeed you have a question or want to make a statement, just chime in. At this point, Mrs. Oliver Brady has concluded her presentation, and so the floor is now the board's to respond and ask questions and gain more knowledge about NIET. And so, Mrs. Oliver Brady, we definitely appreciate, again, the presentation, your presence. Trustee?
Well, I'll start with it. Now, you've been at Fairview for 2 years?
Let's see, not quite 2.
Not quite 2 years.
About maybe a little over a year. I think we started spring of 20 what? So kind of late spring, I would say, kind of 21.
So, help me as a board member. We hear a lot of the, I want to say, key phrases that you mentioned. They're similar, but help us or help me see how do we evaluate what you term success? How do we evaluate that? I mean, I'm not a person that believes a student single score is a definition of success.
Sure.
It's one of the factors possibly.
Yeah.
So, as a board member, what do I look at to be able to evaluate it and determine that, yes, it is successful?
That's a great question, and I think there's probably lots of ways to answer that. The challenges that you're seeing in some of your schools, like Fairview, and as Dr. Wright mentioned, that's been designated by the state as in a certain category. Those didn't happen overnight, and so it does take some time to institute some changes where we will see that positive impact over time. We're also, just clawing our way out of a pandemic and some unprecedented challenges that continues to represent. But like you, we want to see impact on student learning. That's in our mission. That's in your vision and mission. So what does that mean? What we value the most is student growth. So how can we look at the growth of our students over time, in particular? And it's not just necessarily about a state designated letter grade or one, as you mentioned, I agree, one student score, but are we seeing progress in our students learning over time? And there's definitely different data points you could use to determine that. Our state tests, you have benchmark tests here that you utilize and common formative assessments too, so it's not just a state assessment, but certainly that is something that is important to you, or should be important to you. I know it is important to you.
So how does that come to the board? Does that come every 6 weeks, every 9 weeks, every semester? I mean, how do we benchmark that, and how do we, as a board, now keep in mind, we're not in the classroom every day, we're not.
Right. Well, we are not the test makers or providers. But if you're
Right.
thinking about student assessment data, there's certainly a lot of different approaches that you could use. So certainly, you know, there's certain points in time over the years where you might have enough data to show some certain level of intended progress and growth. So that could be one way you as board members might conceive of that. You might also look at, you know, the Department of Education also shares annually growth measures and metrics. And so when we're thinking about, you know, students who are coming from poverty and are experiencing challenges, we want to see them grow. We want to see them grow. And so utilizing some of the state data too that speaks to the growth of each and every student is something I personally would think would be a potential priority for you. But we also want to focus on the educators too and how they are growing. And so we captured some quotes for you today. But you know, I would say, you know, have some individual conversations and talk with school leaders about the difference that they might be seeing in the instructional practice in the classroom that we know will lead to that growth over time. You know, I think it's not just the student test scores, but let's kind of think about the complete picture of what school success looks and sounds like.
But how do you evaluate it?
We use all of those measures.
Okay.
We use all of the above. So we also we are a research organization. So if you, I think our website's listed on one of the handouts. If you go to our website, each spring we evaluate our work and issue a updated summary of our research and our studies and our data analysis on our partners across the country. We just released a study we did in some of our partner schools in Louisiana, and the data showed that they were able to retain their most successful teachers at a higher rate and than their demographically comparable schools, and that rate of retention grew over the years. So we are constantly thinking about that impact. I invite you to look at that research study. I'd be happy to share it with the board as a follow-up here if you're interested. But we are about impact. You know, we don't want to just do this and have some nice conversations and call it a day. You know, as I mentioned, your success is our success. So when your students are growing, that's how we know we've been successful in our partnership.
Yeah, we have definitely the same goals. I was just, sometimes it becomes difficult, at least for me, to be able to stand back and say in 6 months or 12 months or 2 years that yes, this worked or this didn't work, because sometimes that evidence is hard to measure or capture.
Yeah.
But we are tasked with the decision of, do we continue this?
Sure.
Do we change the track? Do we,
Yes.
you know, so those are things that
Absolutely.
if there was some type of, and it sounds like there's going to be communication between you and administration, so there will be some kind of
Yes. You know, we work,
summary, I should say.
for sure. One thing kind of at maybe a more school-based level, we work with each school team to help establish their improvement goals for the year based on what their data is saying and their instructional needs they're seeing in the classroom. What are their targets for the year that are ambitious and rigorous and relevant to their needs? So that might be also something to consider. What were the school's goals for the year, and to what extent were they able to meet those? We also think about, you know, what was the focus of the professional learning? This is something, you know, in our cluster meetings, the teachers really dove deep into. I know at Fairview they focus a lot on their writing instructional practices. So what results were they seeing in their writing that they analyzed, and what growth did they see? I'm sure some members of that team can speak to that more specifically than I can, but you know, can kind of get as granular as you like in certain ways. We also issue each spring, because voices matter to us, a partner survey. So we ask that educators at all levels, you know, teachers, administrators, district leaders, complete our partner survey, and that tells us a lot about their perceptions of this work and whether or not it's making an impact on them individually. And then we share those results with districts. We share those results back with districts.
So do you really kind of, your process with the PLO is the term you used? I mean, does that kind of then become the school improvement plan?
Tell me the acronym PLO is what, just
Well,
there's a lot of
Professional
acronyms.
organization.
Like a,
Okay, kind of like a PLC or a cluster meeting.
Right.
Does that say, and what was your question? again?
well, every year, the educators have spent so much time putting together a state mandated school improvement plan that they spend a lot of hours on, that sometimes I've heard some staff members say, oh yeah, we spent 30 hours last week putting that together.
Yep,
We'll look at it again next year when
right.
not that they're not doing
common
what needs to
refrain.
be done. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not
Yes.
saying they're doing their job, but I mean,
Sits on a shelf.
but I also believe if we're going to create documents, if we're going to create a process, that it's valuable
Absolutely.
and helpful.
Yeah, so I can kind of maybe paint a little bit of a picture for you, maybe without going into the weeds too much today, given our time. But we work with, establishing some goals and really narrowing that focus down to something we can really go after and target in a deep and meaningful way in our weekly professional learning meetings. So yes, we want to improve English language arts, but maybe we want to narrow that down so that when we come to our cluster meetings or our professional learning meetings, we are going deep into one area that might have an impact in other areas. So we narrow it down so that the focus of those goals, yes, that have to be sent to the Department of Education, aren't just goals for goals' sake, check. It's actually the goals that drive the work and the thinking of the leadership team each and every time they meet and every action that they make. So they're always thinking about, what's going to change for kids as a result of the work we're doing as a leadership team. And what does that mean for us as we're sitting around the table and learning something new, a new strategy, a new way of teaching and thinking about student learning together. Those goals are there as their target. It's not just a check the box action, it's something that is driven into their actions each and every week.
Thank you.
So, I'm loving the idea of the structure and the support components. One of the things that I know a lot of times this sort of concept brings along with it is fear that this is going to be an evaluative tool. So I'd love to hear you speak to that.
Sure.
And then also just tell me more about the coaching component, because I'm interested in hearing more about that.
Gosh, that's one of my favorite parts of what we do is the coaching model. But we've talked about the structure of a leadership team. We've talked about the structure of a professional learning organization or professional learning community, PLC, we call them cluster meetings. So, all of those structures can exist without anything changing in terms of your evaluation practices currently. Now, the state law requires evaluations to be conducted. That's a state policy, right? For all educators. So, we have an NIET teaching and learning standards rubric that is used both as an instructional framework. So as a common definition for what great, excellent teaching looks and sounds like. That same tool can also be used as an evaluation rubric. It is, in my view, at the highest level, it's used for both. And it also helps drive what happens in those weekly meetings. And to me, that just makes sense. If I'm thinking from my teacher view now, if these are the expectations that I'm being held accountable to in my evaluation, I should probably have some learning around what those look and sound like. And so that's a goal we hopefully can think about, but it is something that I've seen when all cylinders are really firing, our framework is used really for both. It doesn't have to be though. That is certainly, we want to meet you where you are, and if that's not something that is relevant at this time for you all, then certainly we can provide you with the support and the structures that you need. But our framework, I would say, if you ask most other school districts that partner with us across the state, they would say our framework is the cornerstone of what we do. If take it or leave it, it's something I very much, as a former teacher, I wish I would have had. I hear from a lot of new teachers who are just entering the profession. When they see our framework, they say, Jen, why wasn't I just taught this in college? This would have made my first years of teaching so much easier. It's just all right here. These are the things I should be thinking about. So for that, and I hear veteran teachers, say, gosh, this really, I'm in my last years of teaching. I'm getting ready to retire in a few years, but this has really pushed me to be even better. So there's value in it, but it's not the only thing we do, I should say. Does that make
So
sense?
I'm guessing you probably, just devil's advocate here, you
Sure.
probably also hear people saying, okay, what you're trying to teach me something new, I'm doing well the way I'm doing, so speak to that. Like, what would you say to someone who's saying, I feel like I'm doing pretty well and I'm getting high evaluations and you're wanting me to do something different and...
Yeah, I don't hear that often. I think, I hear from most teachers, they are learners themselves. They want to learn new ideas. And what happens in reality is they're doing that in isolation. They're on the internet. They're seeking out little shreds of time to collaborate with a colleague in a hallway in between a passing period or on their way to lunch or something. They don't have dedicated time to learn from one another and from what the latest research around what moves students tells us. So most teachers that I meet, they're hungry for new ideas. They're hungry for time to collaborate and learn with their colleagues, and so this structure allows for that in a way that, back to your question, in a way that is targeted and aligned to those school goals and to the school's needs in terms of what the data is telling us.
And then the coaching, what does that look like exactly?
Well, there's a whole body of research around this, but I think about, I could learn a lot of things. I could learn about the latest and greatest, exercise program or health initiative, but having someone alongside me and helping me to actually apply those concepts into my practice, that's where we actually see transfer. We've all been going to conferences for years, but what actually is pulled over into our classrooms, into our practices, I was guilty of it myself. I would go to these conferences, it was great, and then nothing much changed. But having a coach work alongside me and say, how about this idea? What do you think about this? Let's try it. Here, I'll help you. Let's do it together. I'll brainstorm with you or try it out and then let me know how it goes. It's that type of collegiality and support that I think can be a difference maker for students and teachers, but really also for school culture.
And so people are assigned a coach, or how does that work?
Those are really school level, district level decisions. I mean, we offer some training and support around those, but we provide training, but much of this work is decided by each school and each district in terms of what makes sense for you all. It's not heavy-handed at all. It's like here's what we know works, or here's some structures, and then those decisions are definitely very locally decided.
Can you help me understand, when does the training occur? Teachers are spread so thin, they're overworked, they have pulled in so many different directions.
Yeah.
When is there time for the collaboration and for the
Sure.
training?
Yeah, well, we tend to provide a lot of training to the leaders, so district leaders, school leaders, teacher leaders in terms of our training. In terms of those weekly collaborative moments, that also, not to sound repetitive here, but that also is very much locally decided. So whatever makes sense for a particular school's daily or weekly schedule, they typically find that time where folks can gather. As I understand it in Richmond, some of those structures are already built in to many schools, weekly or monthly calendars and schedules, that dedicated time to gather to learn. So it might be a matter of just maybe thinking about the focus differently, or maybe thinking about the structure differently. But that's also very much locally decided in terms of schedules and local circumstances. We can certainly be thought partners with you in what makes sense. For that, there's as many schedules as there are schools out there. As many as many district calendars as there are districts, so it's all very, very dependent on what makes sense for y'all.
Anything else?
Mr. Stevens, did you have any questions, sir?
No, I do not at this time. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you for that response. And if indeed you do, just simply chime in. We'll definitely reply. What I would just like to contribute and add to what Mrs. Oliver Brady has presented and also responded to with regard to questions. I know that when I was first approached and was in the beginning stages of understanding the partnership that the school community had already committed to prior to my arrival, I was, and again, I've shared this with Ms. Oliver Brady, so I'm counted to share amongst you all. I said to myself, how is this any different than any other initiative that we as educators have seen years before? Is this just new colors, new names with a very expensive price tag and another, forgive me, fly-by-night type experience? And so, as I've shared with you all time and again, as a middle child, I stopped pulling fingers a long time ago, per se, and so I was reluctant on what it is that NIET was doing differently than some of the other programs that during my tenure as an educator I've been exposed to. And so as I then started to quote unquote do my homework and research more about the Institute and most importantly looking at their time-tested and proven results based on research, I then became inquisitive, and I definitely wanted to learn that much more. And so I'll just read through a few notations that I've come across over the past several months that I've been engaged in fact-finding with NIET, and some of the things that as a classroom teacher at heart, as I always have said, motivated me to learn that much more and try that much more. For example, the intentionality. This is an intentional framework that is designed to bring all those amazing and great things that are occurring in all of our schoolhouses, bring them into the fold. Whereas at times, and as one superintendent had mentioned, at times we as educators understand and know that some of those great things are occurring haphazardly. And what NIET and their framework have been successful in doing is bringing everything into alignment. And through that alignment and through prioritization, based on, again, as one of our educators had alluded to, and we omitted their names as we try and indeed maintain confidentiality, if you will, but nevertheless, as one of the educators stated, it's a framework that allows for each respective schoolhouse to arrive at what their unique, tailor-made needs truly are, based on what's in front of them. It coincides with our district strategic goals, which we will be presenting later this month. Our goal of becoming a professional learning organization, PLO, at the district level, then ideally becoming those professional learning communities, PLCs, within and throughout our school district is still the charge that has been put before us. And with this framework and of what we've come to know and of what we've experienced there at Fairview, as well as in instances there at Dennis, we are again still exploring, still fact-finding, but have found that this framework may indeed be a route for us to accomplish those strategic goals that you all set during and throughout the strategic planning process, again, even prior to my arrival. But I know that one of the things that the NIET NIET framework has also done is it's been a major support for educators. Prior to even, let me first and foremost, one of the mottos and one of the sayings that NIET has is that as central office leaders, as superintendents, our district level leaders, we go first. And it's one of these, the framework calls for us, the the ovals that Mrs. Oliver Brady had highlighted in her presentation, it calls for we as central office leaders to indeed, which is what we've done last month and which we plan to continue to do and have done previously, is learn and encompass all of what the framework calls for and how best to be of support to our building level leaders, who then in turn are that much more supportive and that much more effective in their support for our classroom teachers, which, as I've mentioned time and again, are our most influential and most impactful folks within our classrooms, and the classroom teacher. And then ultimately leading to a confident student learner. And so again, this framework has provided that and has shown to be capable of providing such supports for educators. And that was one of the things that really drew my interest, is how educators felt that finally they had discovered a particular framework that would allow them to collaborate, share, and communicate with one another. I recall one educator here within our district, as well as educators from around the country, when we had a chance to visit the national conference, as well as the educators there in Perry, the educators there in Nettle Creek, our neighboring county school corporation. One of the things that I consistently heard is that educators highlighted the fact that for example, one educator mentioned, in the last 18 years of my service as an educator, within the past 8 weeks of NIET, I've had more collaboration, more conversation, more support from colleagues than ever before. And hearing from superintendents, from central office leaders, building level leaders, as well as other educators, it's a framework that has really allowed everyone to continue in the realm and mode of collaboration. The administration as instructional leaders, one of the principals that I spoke with here in our county, and also even our very own building level leader there at Fairview, had referenced that after so many years as administration, they felt as if they were truly the instructional leaders within their schools and not just managing a building, not just dealing and tending to administrative detail, paperwork and student misconduct, as well as, again, management, scheduling. They actually felt a part of. They were involved and encamped within educators working alongside one another to arrive at best practices and the most effective use of time. Continued support, that's one of the things that I found with this framework and in conversing and seeing. NIET is not just, again, as I mentioned, a fly-by-night framework, and Mrs. Oliver Brady, I definitely don't want to speak for you or speak against anything that my interpretation has led me to believe, but they will consistently maintain and provide supports throughout our time with NIET. This is also a framework that is not intended to be one that we would have to consistently, year in and year out, render services from. The framework is designed ideally to be a standalone, sustainable agent for after roughly the first or a year and a half, 2 years. Is at that point when, for lack of better terms, NIET will take the training wheels off, let go of the guided hand, but still be very close for support. And that was something that, again, going back to that continued support piece. As I also referenced, the sustainability. And I think by far that is what I have found to be most intriguing. Being in the classroom for many years, sitting through one professional development session after the other, scratching my head, saying, didn't really gather too much from that 45 minutes, or not sure if I really gained as much from particular PD sessions with the framework. Again, the intentionality, that sustainability piece, it's something that has outlived and continues to, in those districts that have utilized the framework for more than a decade. It's outlived leadership turnover. It's outlived faculty and staff turnover, which That's another thing with NIET, as we found there in Perry. One of these schools that we had visited, they had veteran teachers that had been there 12, 13, 15 years. And even educators who had departed after being in and around the framework for 7 or 8 years, but then found that their destination or that next district or corporation they served in just wasn't quite their cup of tea, and came back to such corporations. And so again, those type things are really what has led me to continue to fact find and explore if indeed this is a model and a framework that would be supportive, most importantly, to our teachers. I mean, that's as I said, our educators are the most influential people within our classrooms, amazing educators within our classrooms, and providing those supports for those educators is truly the premise. The question came up with regard to NIET. As Mrs. Oliver Brady mentioned, they indeed do have an evaluative tool that has been used in the past and is being used in other corporations. That's not something that we are looking to explore. We exercise and utilize the Standard of Success RISE model, and that is the evaluatory tool that we will continue to use. As Mrs. Oliver Brady mentioned, they indeed do have a particular tool, but that's not something that we are exploring or looking to implement or even visit. That's something that, and again, this is the other caveat that I have found to be very positive with regard to NIET, through the building level instructional leadership team, the ILTs, as well as the corporation, the district instructional teams. Communication and collaboration is the root behind the framework. And again, with the intentional and strategic approaches, it makes it so that all decisions are rooted at the heart of collaboration. Lastly, last two items, student work. It was shared recently, and I had heard this upon the visit there at the national conference. I've also been involved with, in past practice, other initiatives that also have produced such results when it comes to student work. But one of our very own educators had referenced that at times we understand and know that implicit bias and other features that come with just being human play out. And with our demographic here in Richmond Community Schools, at times students the question becomes whether or not content or material may be above the heads or a little too rigorous for our students. We had one of our very own educators state that through the framework, through the intentionality, the student work that was produced proved to that educator and to their cluster team that indeed our students are capable of accomplishing and completing rigorous tasks, rigorous work. And as a result, they stated how much more confident those learners became in their abilities to indeed tackle tough tasks, tough content, tough work. But most importantly, as the educator mentioned, they then became that much more confident in their abilities as an educator to indeed be at the top of their craft. And so in looking at this, because again, I've looked at it with a very close and skeptical eye, I wanted to, and I still, again, forgive me, Mrs. Oliver Brady, again, I've been in conversation with educators, not only within our district, around the county, around the state, around the country, that there still are questions. Some educators are still, and that's fine. That's part of the process. There's still questions as to whether or not this is indeed the best route to go. What I will say is that of what we've experienced here within our own district, what others have seen for a multitude of years, it's definitely been proven successful. And compared to what we typically do within our profession in all corporations around the country, at times, again, we do things great, but when we bring it all under one universal forward-thinking movement and motion, we can accomplish so much more. Finally, to your point, Mrs. Stoltz, there is always has been a healthy fear with regard to teacher evaluations. And one of the things that I had proposed, and I've asked Mrs. Stewart to cover her ears when I say this, but anytime you have such an initiative or a proposal for such change when it comes to frameworks, naturally as classroom teachers, sometimes the first things that come to mind is, this is something that's new, it's different. These things could be potentially, if I'm not meeting them with fidelity, these things could potentially be used against me to terminate and or reassign or what have you. What I would love to explore, and I've mentioned this, is a temporary suspension of teacher evaluations. We have had hold harmless in past practice as a result of COVID-19 and some of the other setbacks and challenges when the state was revising and retooling standardized testing. There's been the hold harmless, if you will, in past practice. And one of the things that I've had conversation with our central office leadership, our cabinet, some of our building level leaders, is to try and remove and try and quell the anxiety that comes with such an initiative. And again, I've been informed that there are major obstacles and major hurdles, and it may indeed be impossible. But what I would love for nothing more, if indeed we explored NIET, corporation-wide K through 8, is for our educators to feel confident. And even as we move down the road, if it's not even with NIET, feel confident that they can make mistakes without penalty. If indeed the best of all intentions are being put forth, then as central office building level leaders, we want to be able to support our educators as they get messy with NIET or get messy with a new initiative or a new approach and thought when it comes to instruction. And so, like I said, it's something that Mr. Stewart and I know Attorney Cross and others they've shared with me. Continue to think and brainstorm, but at this particular juncture, we definitely indeed have to maintain some of the same evaluatory practices that we have in the past. But the goal, if nothing else, as we move forward, whether it's within IET or not, is to make sure that our teachers are confident that they indeed can do what they believe to be best for the students that they have right there in front of them in the classrooms, and then ultimately as a school, as a corporation as a whole. And so, again, Mrs. Oliver Brady, forgive me, as I've said to you before, and I'll say it for the last time, it's not necessarily rocket science. This is not something that is brand new. But what you all have been able to do, of what I've observed thus far, is capture with intentionality a framework that allows for things that, as I said, are occurring in amazing fashion to be brought in alignment so that we can be that much more effective, that much more efficient, and ultimately provide that much more for our students. And so I apologize for downing the discussion a little bit, but I wanted to share, and again, just to piggyback on some of the things you presented, the things that we have continued to uncover with regard to NIET.
Thank you. Yes, and what we say is, some of these big ideas that we talked about today, collaboration, support, teacher leadership, professional learning, something we often say, two things really. We don't say it's not rocket science, but we do say it's not guesswork. This is not just like, how are we ever going to do this? We know how to do this. We've been doing this and supporting districts and doing this work for over 20 years. We have the right history and background and context and tools and trainings to make all of these big ideas we've talked about today, which all sound real great, right? Come to reality, not just be up here in the clouds, but bring them to your schools for greater success. The other thing we also say is, this isn't about an I gotcha, like trying to catch somebody doing something incorrect or off target, and Dr. Wright, you alluded this too, but rather it's about, I got you. Okay, we're here for you. And that really goes for all of our district partners at the district as well. And that's what we value the most as an organization. We're here for support in whatever way, you need and whatever we can provide, because we got you in this work. Your success is our success, and you're right, when we partner with our districts and our other institutions that we do work with, we're in it for the long haul. We want to see you all thrive too. So your students deserve it. So I'll end on that note, and if there's anything else, I'd be happy to share any other information, or if you have any questions, I wanted to share my contact information. It's on the last slide. I backed up and now I got to fast forward. That's Jay Brady. My Twitter is right there too. If you're on Twitter, I don't know why I put that on there, but the email is probably the most important thing. So if you have any other follow-up questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you today. Thank you for having me in your beautiful city.
And Mrs. Oliver Brady, just again to piggyback on your closure, as one of our other educators who has worked extensively with many of our fellow educators throughout the district, goes on to say NIET provides a structure that focuses on student work while making explicit the success criteria for mastering rigorous standards. Field testing supports meaningful collaboration among teachers and instructional coaches with student work at the center. Genius, as this particular educator had concluded with. And so, as you had mentioned, as we have found, and as we will continue to explore and fact find, we just are definitely trying to find the best ways to be of support to our classroom teachers.
Love that. Yep, and if we can ever connect you with any of our other partners or board members across the state or country, we'd be happy to make those connections for you as you're having those conversations.
All right.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Moving on to item 5, consent items. Dr. Wright.
Trustees, President Weber, I come before you to ask for approval of consent items 5.01 and 5.02 as presented, along with the addendum 5.02.
I'll make the motion that we accept the consent items as presented with the addendum.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion by Jeff Schleifer, second by Nicole Schultz. Any questions or comments?
Just a comment that Mr. Stevens just texted, said he got disconnected and is unable to reconnect, so he is done for the night.
All right. And we don't have to call the roll. Unfortunate.
You said that like it was unfortunate.
Anything else? Questions or comments on consent? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to item 6, action items. Dr. Wright.
President Weber, trustees, I ask that Mrs. Karen Scalf join us in the forum to present action items 6.01, 6.03 as presented, Mrs. Scalf, and then we'll come back and pick up 0.02 after.
Do you want me to do 2 while
You know
we're
what?
at
If
it?
you want, absolutely. Go for it. Thank you, ma'am.
Under 6.01, we have the joint facility agreement renewal with Richmond Art Museum. This is basically the same agreement that was approved 5 years earlier, with one exception. We did remove one of the recitals simply because it was unnecessary, having all of the other documents now in place that did not exist at the time of that original document. So tonight before you is the agreement with Richmond Art Museum, and it is a joint facility usage agreement where we just spell out the terms of the facility and how they use it, what our responsibilities are, what their responsibilities are, and just some basic outlines for how that works. So it's my recommendation tonight that we approve this renewal agreement as it has been presented.
Thank you. Happy to entertain a motion.
I move that we approve action item 6.01, RAM joint facility renewal.
Motion by Kristen Brunton.
Well, Ron, is this something that I should recuse myself as a board member for RAM?
Yeah, I think, I don't think you don't have a pecuniary interest in it,
Okay.
nor, because there's really no direct financial benefit flowing to either party. It's
Nope.
obviously a true partnership.
Then I will second
And
the
I think
motion.
you also annually file a conflict of interest disclosure
Right.
statement.
I just didn't want to
So I don't see this rising to that level.
That's why I was holding on.
I'll
I felt
second
it-
the motion.
I thought it was appropriate.
Thank you.
All right, second by Nicole Stoltz. Any questions or comments? Seeing
Just-
none.
Well, I would like to make the comment that, I think it's a wonderful, I love that we happen to be the only high school in the country that has an art museum attached to it. That is very cool and something that we should be proud of. And I love that we have a great partnership and their director is doing a great job collaborating with the students, especially, well, in all the schools with the Art Is program, bringing them into the museum as well as with the Van Gogh that we have now bringing art to them. So that's been really fun to see. And then just that every single student in English class was able to visit the museum this year was really impressive. So just want to say I'm excited about Brim and our collaboration with them.
Right.
Now we can vote, sorry.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Mrs. Scout.
Okay, before you tonight are 3 agreements for exceptional education services. The agreements are for occupational therapy services, orientation and mobility services, and school psychology services. Each of these agreements is with individuals who provide services in their area or supervision of other staff members here at RCS that require this type of service supervision. So before you tonight is an agreement with Miss Becky Smallwood, and her rate is $75 per hour. Ms. Leanne Bachmeyer is the second agreement for occupational therapy. Her rate per hour is $70, and school psychologist Donald Scott, his services are at a rate of $60 per hour. So before you tonight are the 3 service agreements for exceptional education needs. These are renewals from previous years. And there have been no changes with the exception of Ms. Smallwood's rate did change by $5 per hour.
Thank you. Happy to entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion that we accept the services agreement and listed in 6.02.
Motion by Jeff Schleifer,
I'll second.
second by Brad Walton. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Mrs. Scout.
Okay, the last item I have for you tonight is the memorandum of understanding with the Wayne County Jail for adult education services. We have had a partnership with the jail for a number of years. It predates me, so it's been quite a long time. And this is a really great program for students in our city and adult learners who want to improve their personal situation. So it's my recommendation that we approve this memorandum of understanding with the Wayne County Jail for 2022-2023 school year.
Thank you.
I move that we approve action item 6.03.
Motion by Kristen Brunton,
I'll second.
second by Nicole Stoltz. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Dr. Wright?
President Weber, trustees, I come before you this evening with regard to item 6.04, Cope Environmental Center Agreement. It is recommended that the Board of School Trustees approves the agreement for Cope Environmental Center as presented for the 2022-2023 school year. This agreement is the result of a partnership with Cope Environmental Center to provide science curriculum supplements at the primary level by introducing hands-on environmental educational opportunities. This partnership has been a very successful complement to the science curriculum, and we look forward to working with Cope again. There are no fee increases for the 2022-2023 school year. So, as presented, we seek your approval.
Thank
I
you.
move that we accept the agreement from Cope Environmental Center.
Motion by Nicole Stoltz,
I'll second.
second by Jeff Schleifer. Any questions or comments?
I will make one note. On this agreement, it says that this particular program does not include transportation expenses, but I will let the board know that Coke does offer grants to teachers for transportation costs. So we encourage teachers to participate in that grant program whenever it's available. And it will fund the entire cost of the trip at that point from the transportation side. So even though it's not part of the agreement, as funds allow at Coke, they do provide us that opportunity.
Thank you. Anything else? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Dr. Wright?
President Weber, trustees, again, before you this evening for retrieval approval for action item 6.05, the IMCA latchkey agreement. It is recommended that the Board of School Trustees approve the latchkey agreement between Richmond Community Schools and the YMCA as presented for the 2022-2023 school year. Indiana Code 20-5 requires school corporations to contract for an entire school program, for an after-school program for students. There's no money received from Richmond Community Schools for the latchkey program. The monies come directly from the parents for services. RCS provides space and snacks. Due to increases to staffing, costs, supplies, and insurance, there will be fee increases for the 2022-2023 school year. And as you can see, the increases are there listed within the documentation. And so again, before you is retrieval approval for item 6.05 as presented.
All right.
I'll make a motion we approve the latchkey agreement, 6.05.
I'll second.
Motion by Jeff Schleifer, second by Brad Walton. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Dr. Wright?
And finally, President Weber, trustees, I am before you for action item 6.06, the Richmond High School Student Handbook for the 2022-2023 school season. It is recommended that the Board of School Trustees approves the Richmond High School Student Handbook as presented for this upcoming school year. Building leaders have worked in collaboration with department chairs, teacher leaders, and building and corporation discussion teams to revise last year's handbook. More revisions can be found there in red. And again, we come before you for approval as presented for item 6.06.
Thank you.
I move that we approve action item 6.06.
Motion by Kristen Breton,
I'll second.
second by Nicole Stoltz. Any questions or comments?
Well,
Yes.
I don't have that in front of me, but I do recall looking at it when I came through on the agenda. One suggestion you might want to take back for the high school staff to think about is, do they want to make any type of policy statement about A, participation in graduation being a privilege, not a right, and B, serious disciplinary, serious misconduct can result in a student being denied the right to participate in that. In my legal memoranda, in May, that's always a hot topic, so it's a good thing that it doesn't need to be really, into the weeds, but it does need to be that general advisement that participation in graduation ceremonies, not getting the diploma, but participation in the ceremonies themselves is not a guaranteed right and can be appropriately sanctioned.
Yes, sir. Duly noted. We indeed will relay that to RHS. See that we make note of that next May.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cross. Anything else? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you all. Moving on to policy update and review. Looks like we have two policies on second reading and approval. Happy to
Key for you, Brad.
entertain a long-winded motion.
How about
Okay,
that? Go ahead.
I move that we
read
accept,
everything.
accept, policy review 7.01, policy 4517, student harassment to approval. And we move policy 2464, programs for high ability students to final approval.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown.
I'll second.
Second by Jeff Schleifer. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion's passed 5-0. Moving on to our work session. Our work session is the prospective school board candidate forum. Before I begin, I would ask the audience if we have any prospective school board candidates. You don't have to answer, but if there was anyone in particular, I don't see any hands. So we'll go through the information for those watching and for the record, and then move on. I guess I'll take the lead. I had a few things I wanted to put out. As many of you may know, we have 3 school board seats up for election this fall. We have 2 at-large seats and 1 district seat. How that is candidates can run at-large, living anywhere in the city. But for our 3 districts, you have to live in that district to represent that district. However, all voters vote on each candidate. So you may vote on a District 1 candidate even if you're in District 3. And so with those seats available, we wanted to provide some information for the public that might be interested in running for school board. It's a fairly simple process. The county clerk is located at the courthouse, and you need to go, this won't show up on video, but it's a 1-page form, and that form is due August 26th at noon. With that, you have your name, the office you're seeking, your address, and then 10 signatures. It's recommended, obviously, you obtain more than 10 in case there's any issues with the signatures you've received. As soon as that form is submitted, you can be put on the ballot if everything checks out. And so that is really all you need to do to run for school board office.
I think one of the disqualifying factors on the signature is they have to live at that residence for over a year.
I believe you're correct. And so that's why it's important to, and then I think you also have to be at your residence for.
Yeah, you have to be at residence for 12 months, and everyone who signs the paper has to be at that residence for 12 months.
Yeah.
So that's why we recommend you get 15 signatures instead of 10, just in case a couple names get thrown out.
Then as far as running, the process, campaign finance kicks in, and you're allowed to legally spend up to $500 with no reporting qualifications. So you might buy some yard signs or run some Facebook ads or whatever. If you choose to have to spend more than, or actually raise funds, then there are a number of forms that have to that fall into place, and those dollars need to be recorded and reported. So so a lot of candidates try to stay under that $500 threshold just to keep costs down and to avoid the extra reporting.
The reporting is a total of 3 times.
Okay.
Yeah, there's time periods, and so once you report, then you have to report.
And then there's a final report. For those that don't know, there is a link to our districts on the website, on the RCS website. District 1 is basically north of 40, east of 27, and north of, looks like the railroad tracks west of 27. So that's currently represented by Nicole Stoltz. Then we have District 2, which is south of 40 and east of 27, and that is represented by Mr. Walton. And then the remainder, District 3, is then west of 27, south of 40, and then it looks like about 10 blocks north of 40, roughly. Again, you'll need to confer to the map, as to run as a district position, you have to live in the district. So, and that is Kristen Brunton's district. So I had those things to say. And jump in anytime if anyone has anything, because I just
So the
have lots of notes.
Indiana State Board Association has a 90-minute seminar that's virtual, if anyone is interested in doing that. I thought I would just read what they say, just if
Right
anyone's
here.
interested.
You're good.
You said jump in. So,
I'm listening.
okay, do you want to read it?
No.
Okay. Thought your voice was getting hoarse. All right. Our public school corporations are the heart of our Indiana communities. Choosing to run for a seat on your local school board of trustees is a decision that should not be made lightly. School board service is a time commitment that requires patience, dedication, and the will to work with your fellow board members to make crucial decisions regarding the work and future of your local school corporation, greater community, and most importantly, your community's children. Understanding the scope of the board member's role is important as you consider your potential candidacy. The Indiana School Board Association invites you to learn more about the role, as well as the expectations and the legal parameters of school board members. This 90-minute seminar will arm you with the basic knowledge and answer your questions to help you consider if board service is right for you and what to expect if you're elected. So registration is like from 6:45 to 7 p.m. on July 19th, which is when that virtual board member or board candidate, it's like I said, a seminar forum. So if anyone's interested, that would be a great resource. So
Where do you find that at?
so it's at web.isba/ind.org/events. I'm guessing you could just go to the ISBA website and then it would direct you.
If you
But that would give you a
search,
direct link.
new member, it comes up. Right?
Okay.
So yes, thank you, Ms. Stoltz. That was one of my other points. And then, but I just had a couple more things to cover. Then we'll open it up for, I guess, perspectives from our current board. But just some things to remember. These positions as trustees are elected officials. This is a $40 million corporation. And so it, we all take it real serious. And I would hope any member interested in being a board member have that same thought. We have 800 employees, over 300 plus professional teaching staff. We have 7 board members, and so in being a board member, you are all decisions are made in this room, in public. You are one of 7, and so and then the idea is that you respect the decision of the board. And so we a lot of times you'll have certain issues that'll prod you to be a school board member, but it's a much greater task than what you may think when you arrive at the table. Our current compensation, and this may change, so I don't want to spend too much time, but board members receive a meeting stipend, and that may change, and then currently have basically extremely low cost insurance, and that could possibly look differently. So just be cautious. I know we've had some recent changes, and we may make an adjustment to that this early fall, late summer. And then decisions are tough, so prepare to disappoint friends, have people upset with you, and that sort of thing. I know we all do it. We think it's the best interest of the students, and that drives their decision making and the choices we make. And I believe everyone that comes to the board has that same goal. So with that, I will turn it over to the rest of the members if they would like to add anything. Maybe how much time you spend, or we have working groups, we have retreats, we have board meetings. There's a lot. So fill in, please.
a lot of different things go through my head on this. One, you don't realize at the time that it does take, and I mean, I'm not saying that as a deterrent or anything like that. But you put in, on average, anywhere from 8 to 15 hours to do it right. By the time you're looking at email, researching topics, talking with individuals with personal agendas or whatnot, and it's tough to go a lot of places without answering a question on something. And there's a lot of things that we get asked in public and like out at the grocery store or out to eat that we just can't comment on. And a lot of the stuff we try to stay out of, as far as personnel or complaints. We try to direct the person who has the complaints up the proper chain of command, because ultimately it could come down to us eventually being a overruling party or upholding a decision that was made by the superintendent. So just not to muddy the water, we try to stay out of it a little bit as far as individual topics. I know when I ran, I always thought board members had kind of more power than they do. I mean, as an individual board member, you really don't have any power at all. As Mr. Weber alluded to, you have power in this setting as one voting member of 7, in this case 5 tonight. So, I could have come in with a major agenda, and because I was ticked off at something and ran, but it's not going to do much good only having one voice out of 7. And that's not a real healthy place to be at. To join a board is to come in with an agenda that's set. One thing, just from being in John's role, the 2 years previous to him, a lot of it is a lot of give and take. Sometimes I don't agree with what other board members say or feel or their viewpoint, but I've got to step back and really understand where they're coming from, and so a lot of that's where the retreats are really handy and really come in nice, because we get to know each other more on a personal level. A lot of other people's backgrounds, and so when another member says something that you totally don't agree with, you can understand where they're coming from with their point of view. It's an eye-opening experience, and it's unlike anything I've ever done before. As far as I think John nailed it on the head when you said be prepared to disappoint family and friends and relatives and everything else, because sometimes when you're making a decision for the corporation, there's a lot more that comes into play than one person's point of view. So.
I guess I don't want, I just, actually July 1st, I just crossed 16 years. So I think with that length of time, I've been through 5, 6 superintendents, several great board members have come and gone. But I think one of the points that John made really needs to be stated with much more facts. He made a comment that it's a $40 million school corporation. And the topics that come along with that are unbelievable. I mean, everything. just to think about everything that could possibly go wrong or go right in a school system at some point will come across your desk, or an email, or a phone call, or a text. Honestly, out of my first 4-year term, I spent the first 2 years just trying to understand what was going to come up next. I didn't really feel like I could start to become an effective school board member. I'm going to use that term, effective. Others may have different opinions. But it wasn't until I was on 3 or 4 years to where I knew, okay, the start of school is coming in the fall, and we got transportation coming up. We got negotiations coming up. We've got enrollment to worry about. We've got, oh, wait a minute. The state's going to stop the financing for this 1 month. So how do we cut $700,000 out in 30 days? Or just the amount of information, how fast the information comes, because you're sitting out there thinking it takes forever to change a direction or have a process or do anything. That's right. But when you're meeting every 2 weeks, that in itself sometimes slows the process. But it's almost impossible to have a full-time job and be a school board member and be effective.
And to your point, there's a lot of school corporations across the state that only meet once a month. So
I'm the type of person that, and I've said this before, and I'm sure Karen can attest, I like information. Well, the more information you ask for, the more workload you increase. And I'm not complaining about that, but it does come. I was thinking with Brad when he said up to 15 hours a week, and I'm sitting there thinking, I would bet my average is closer to 25 a week. And that's if there's no issues. So anytime you go through a superintendent search, I mean, you're meeting every 2 or 3 days. It's really just amazing that once you sit in the seat, how much different it looks from here than it does from out there. It's rewarding at times, and at other times you're wondering, why do you want to put yourself through it? But I think it's fair that you really need to kind of have an understanding of what you're getting into. Because I can guarantee if you have 100 people that have a thought about the issue, an issue, or concern, that 50 people are going to be on this side and 50 people are going to be on this side. So you have to walk that fine line. And I only have 2 rules that I live by on the school board. One is I have to make decisions that I feel like I go to sleep at night on. And I've made some wrong decisions, but unfortunately you don't know about those until 2 years later. And I've made some right decisions. The other thing is that I think the most important thing to be a school board member is to be able to be a person that can be an independent thinker, can take in data and analyze it yourself, because you have to be able to form an opinion or some type of an opinion or some kind of idea, because it takes several years before you even learn to ask the right questions. And it's just amazing. I have a better understanding of our national political environment by being on the school board, because you think, well, why can't we do this and change this and make this easy and do that? And, well, you can't turn like that. I mean, you can't make a decision here without talking to that group, or you can't make a decision here because if you want everybody involved and you want a collaborative approach, then all of a sudden you've taken a decision that every single person sitting in this room and listening to this now would say, well, that's an easy decision. Why don't you just make that decision in 3 days? Well, that decision now turns into 3 months. So until you sit here, you really can't see it. So I would just say, be aware of the time, be flexible with your time. Fortunately, I can be flexible with my job. I have some flexibility there. But if you come on the school board and you work 8 to 5 every day and you can't get away from an 8 to 5 job, then every administrator or every person you're going to meet with, you're going to have a meeting after 5 o'clock. Well, that's going to be a problem because, you know, the staff works all day, the teachers work all day. The last thing they want to do is come talk to a school board member that they don't think really understands what's going on anyway at 6:30 at night. So be prepared to have a 9 o'clock meeting or a 10:30 meeting or an 11 o'clock meeting or a 3 o'clock meeting. And so all I'm saying is I'm not trying to discourage you, but I want you to understand that you really need to be able to be flexible with your time, because your time is not 2 hours every other Wednesday night. It just isn't. So I guess as I walk away from the school board, I'm going to be glad that I spent my time on it. I'm going to feel like I feel like I've done what I felt like I wanted to do. You know, I started with back at Highland Heights when they had the I can't even remember what it was called now, but it was basically a site-based learning environment then. So you were on a site-based team, and I started as a parent of a child at a site-based school, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm complaining. I'm a parent that's complaining about a process, and finally I said, you know what? I think if I'm going to complain, I should be willing to step in and try to make change. And I guess I failed because 16 years later, I'm still trying to make change. But I say that tongue in cheek. I mean, I don't regret my time, but it's probably, I will say this, it's probably been the most thankless task or job that I have ever done. And that's just straight up. So, that's it. That's almost like a farewell speech.
We'll hit you again this December.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Well, what I heard Jeff say is that I'm an ineffective school board member because this is my first year. No, I would agree completely that, I mean, the first year, just there's so much to learn, so much information to take in and gather. And a few extra things I wanted to add and echo what he said also, but I think you need to have a passion for education and passion for serving students in our district, and a passion and agree completely with their vision and mission statements if you want to be on the board. I think it's very rewarding as well and exciting, like our new STEAM proposal and maybe some new initiatives. But for me, getting in the classrooms and seeing students this year and helping out as principals needed in some classrooms or wherever the principals decided to put us was a really rewarding for me. And I think those things are important. I echo also what I think everyone said, the time. It's very time consuming. I've actually even written down a month of my time just to figure out, because in my head I feel like it's a lot of time, and I average 26 hours a week on school board items, whether talking on the phone to constituents or reading emails or meeting with retreats or meetings. So I think just keep that in mind, that it can be very time consuming, also very rewarding, but you need to have a lot of time. The other thing is, I think school board members face friction and animosity, when the public's not happy with how you vote or how things go. So I think beware of that. I'd echo what Brad said also in the fact that, we are one of 7, and when we make decisions, there's oftentimes maybe we don't agree with everything, but we can respect one another. I think respect is important. I think that's all I wanted to add.
I still have the list of the time commitments, if you think that would be helpful for me to read. We presented those whenever we were looking for Suzanne's replacement, which ended up being Kristen, but I'm happy to.
Yeah,
go through
and if
those
you just cover the main, I mean, the working groups, I mean, the
Okay.
retreats, those main kind of meetings, categories as well.
Alright, I'll just go through it quickly. Okay, so board meetings twice a month, typically 2 hours long. Exec sessions following board meetings. When we have those are typically about 2 hours. Reading through the board updates prior to the board meeting. Personally, it takes me 1 to 2 hours, and you're doing that twice a month. Reading through emails, responding to constituents, concerns, average, again, this is my average, 2 to 4 hours per week, depending on the week. Working group meetings, we are currently doing about 1 to 2 hours once a month. That does require research before and after, though, depending on what the topic is. Attending events such as graduations, honors and awards, celebration of excellence, all of that stuff. May is an especially busy month. So except in May, you're looking at 1 to 2 hours per month. And then during May, closer to 3 to 4 hours a week. We do provide new board member orientation and training, which is nice to kind of get you going. That usually takes about 6 to 7 hours total. It can either be done at one time or broken up. I think I did mine in 2 sessions. School board retreats are 4 times a year. We have an 8-hour day, so we typically just take a Saturday and do 4 times a year. School board conferences. Once a year, typically 2 to 3 days. So you're looking at 4 to 8 hours per day during those times. Research visits, whenever there's something that we're looking into. For instance, Meridian Health Services, you'll want to visit other school districts, see how they're doing it. So you're looking at anywhere from like 4 to 8 hours, and that would be depending on what we've got coming up 2 to 3 times a year. And then optional but highly encouraged, Kristen mentioned the visit and volunteer in schools. For me, that's mandatory, but again, it is optional. So I do the 1 to 2 hours per week. So those are kind of the highlights of what it looks like.
On the visits, I mean, people kind of, the board kind of, we try to cover events the best we can, but people, I attend a lot of sporting events.
Yes.
I like the cultural events. And so as a board, you try to cover as much as you can, but I think we kind of are drawn to areas we have interest in, and, many things we would try to go to regardless. But I think, this particular board, I think has been very active, both administratively, but also try to be out in public and try to talk to folks. And I know I missed the band rehearsal last week. I hated to do that, but that was on my list to try to get to. But yeah, hopefully we've not discouraged anyone. I think it is rewarding, and graduation's probably one of the best experiences, especially when you've had relationships with the kids and the students. But adult ed graduation is just as rewarding. Honors and awards is fabulous. Sporting events are great to go to. But I don't know. Anything else? So we like I say, we have 3. Mrs. Brunton, District 2, I believe, is choosing to run. I don't know. You have to make an announcement, but her seat will be up in the fall, as well as 2 at-large seats. And so, Mr. Morey at this time I think is not considering running again, although that could change, as well as Mr. Schleifer could have a second opinion. But we certainly want the public to try to. It is a really important position, and in Indiana as well as the country, it just needs school board members that are dedicated and trying to do the right and the best they can.
I do have one more comment.
Yes, sir.
President Weber. From the first time I was on the school board 16 years ago to today, the state has taken away half of my decisions, half of our decisions. So we have become so much more micromanaged by what our legislators want us to do. What programs that we have to offer, what benefits or what, I mean, they're telling them. I often have said, especially here recently, I said, you know how I would respond to the state? Tell them, come take our school system over. I said, they'll back off real quick then. That's probably the most frustrating thing with me is we have legislators that are not, even our local legislators, our local legislators are not local to Richmond in the decisions and the conversations they have. And it just irks me when they're trying to mandate something here that Noblesville has to do, or Hamilton Southeastern has to do, or, you know, and part of that I think personally come from how they've changed the funding from years ago. And now with them changing the funding again in the last couple of years of getting rid of the separate transportation or separate funds to now just 2 funds, and now they're telling you what percentage to spend. I mean, it's basically the legislator's way of saying, we're going to issue all of these mandates and not pay for them. Oh, and if you need these mandates that we're going to issue, if you need money for them, go back to your property taxpayers and tell them that you're going to double their taxes so you can afford to do it. I mean, the circuit breaker tax, we lose over $3 million right there. So I guess that's the most frustrating thing to be aware of is often when you're sitting up here making decisions, I've already been limited on half of what I'd like to do because the state said I have to do this. That's now you need to go talk to your legislators.
Which we all do. I mean, that's, we have a legislative liaison.
I got on that soapbox.
No, Mr. Morey, but I think we all try to build our relationships, particularly with Senator Rotz and Representative Barrett, I mean, they're super important. And so we'll attend lots of events and you try to be in a position where your calls are returned. And that's not always easy either. But
yeah, you won't even get the chance to talk to the legislators. If you call them, you'll get their people in their office that support.
But we keep trying. Anything else on being a board member?
I think we see 40 applicants, right?
I only have the one copy, but I'm happy to distribute it. Well, thank you all, and I hope watching at home that this at least shed a little bit of light. It is rewarding work, but it is not easy work. So
One thing too, like how Keith is able to be on Richmond's board, how I was able to be on Richmond's board early. You cannot be an employee of Richmond Community Schools and run for board.
that's correct.
So, want to put that out there.
You can run, you can't stay, you can run, but you can't be a board member and an employee.
Okay, you can run, but then you'd have to choose if you get elected.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Scott. All right, anything else? Okay, moving on to board reports and old business. We have our working group rundown, educational working group. Kristen?
We have not met, but we are meeting, I think, this coming Monday. And on the agenda is feedback from the Hibbard-Stein proposal, part of the discussion, and Fairview teachers are presenting regarding the NIET conference. And also, a point of discussion is the synchronous and asynchronous learning in regards to snow days. Those are just 3 upcoming items that the education working group will be discussing, but we have not met since our last meeting.
Full agenda. Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Thank you for letting us know what's going on.
Building and grounds, Jeff Bradford.
Well, we have not met since our last board meeting. There's been a lot of vacations. Summertime is going to make it tough. We need to get together as a group because there's a lot of tasks that are coming up that we're going to have to, they've asked us to address, to have us look at, but actually we need to get with one another and kind of help it develop this agenda and get it going. But I think the buildings, and I think after this Friday, I think the vacations are over for the building and grounds people, so I think we'll be able to but there's
So-
nothing really to report right now.
Well, one thing that, just to make everyone aware of, is, with the McGuire Hall renovation, it was brought to our attention, by the theater department that, we may have overlooked some things, or they weren't, we're trying to make sure that we're not overlooking some things in regards to the audio and lighting system. So we're doubling back to, make sure that those are being addressed, so that.
I thought it was the rigging, not the audio and the lighting.
Rigging
It's the fly
primarily,
system
and
and,
number of,
Number of microphones.
Yeah.
okay, so that would be audio, right?
Yep.
And,
lighting looks super complicated.
well,
There's
so
a
all
lot
that
of
to
wires.
say, it's all, I'm really glad that the theater department brought that to our attention before we're signing off on anything and before, we've wrapped things up, because, we definitely want that space to be used for, stage performances. So, yeah, anyway, just wanted to let everybody know that we are looking into that so that, it can be used for that. I know, the Shakespeare Festival, for instance, was hoping to use that stage. We'd love to have some community events there as well, so we're just making sure that it all works out. Yep, that's
It's
it.
looking very good. I was in there a
Mhm.
couple weeks ago. Appearance wise, it's stellar. Anything else for building and grounds? All right, finance working group. Jeff Crystal.
I will report. I was trying to remember what we discussed because so much is going in my mind, but
We
we
remember
discussed-
Karen.
Karen was there. No, we discussed the mileage rate policy and we did discuss changing that. And we went back and forth 5 or 6 times. I think we ended up, we're gonna use the federal rate, which would be an increase in the mileage rate that we're currently offering. We're currently offering the state rate, but the state is reevaluating because of gasoline prices every 3 to 4 months, which creates a lot of instability in how we figure out the finances. So that would increase their mileage rate to 62.5 cents till the end of December if we follow that rate. So we discussed that and the implications of that and who it affects and how it affects the budget, because that is a slight increase. So we did want to be fiscally sound on that, and I think we discussed that through. We also, Karen shared with us some upcoming changes to the state financial reporting. So that's constantly a moving target, it seems to be, and Karen unfortunately has to deal with how all of that reporting changes. And then we also talked about next meeting beginning to look at the budget process and the upcoming budget.
And some of the concern areas.
And some of the concern areas, thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a quick overview of what we discussed during the long meeting.
Let's just talk about buses a little bit.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, a little bit about electric buses and the feasibility of that.
But I do think Karen is coming back to the board with recommendations or policy or something for the mileage.
Right, so I haven't gotten the minutes out, I haven't been at my desk much this week, but the plan is to get the minutes out and they will provide you with the recommendation from the group out to the full board on how we move, and it'll come to you at the next board meeting so that we can be ready to roll for the start of the school year.
Because there's some
So-
language as well we wanted to
Yeah.
maybe address.
Yeah, so we're gonna take a look at the policy. It may be a policy update that we do. That's primarily where that language exists. And then we may have to update some administrative guidelines just to match that policy. We're gonna take a look at that and how all of that cleaned up and ready for you at the next board meeting.
I believe this came from you, Karen. I loved hearing that in regards to ESSER funds, the majority of schools in the state have designated 20%, I believe is what you had said.
20% was mandatory.
Was mandated for academics. So again, majority of schools in the state have that was what was made mandatory. But that we've allotted over 60%, is that?
Yeah, so
Correct.
we're right at 60%.
Okay.
When the board determined the ratios that we were looking at on how those funds were to be used and what we needed to tackle, the state mandated it go to learning loss. And so it's not even just academics, it had to be to any kind of achievements or acceleration or remediation or learning loss. And so ESSER 2 and 3 had some pretty tight restrictions on that being the goal. And the 20% came into play in ESSER 3. So when in conversation with my peers, this was something that came up at the joint seminar with IAPSS, IASBO, and ISBA. Kind of everybody like compares notes, and we are ahead of a lot of curves. There are a few school districts that did say we want to do more than the mandatory 20%, but we are one of those. And so that's something that as we evaluate when things come in and how things are rolling through those ESSER funds, we're trying to keep that at the forefront and adding to that 60% whenever possible, rather than taking away from at all. That has not been the conversation. So as we look ahead to modifications or as things come up, that's always what's in the back of our heads when we look at, if that mobility even becomes available, where we move.
And then I was encouraged also to see that the state mandate for that 45% of the education fund is supposed to be for salaries, and we're currently at 56%. Is that correct?
We had some conversation about this. We are at 57.5. What I will say is I was just in a very lengthy meeting with the DOE with a small group of business officers where they wanted to kind of compare our data and take a drill down into it. And every school does things a little bit different. There are some things that I will go to the sword over for our teachers because I know what they're doing, and just because they're in an account code based on the requirements that the state sets, they're still teaching. So to me, an account code doesn't mean that they aren't in a classroom teaching instruction, because that's what they do. And so I had a very lengthy conversation with the DOE on that, and they respected that, and they were like, oh, we didn't even think about that. They're numbers people, they don't. And so there are things that that we're trying to work with and help. I do think that we're going to see some mandatory changes, that I have to move some staff out, that even though I know what they do directly impacts a classroom, the state is going to say you don't get to count them as a part of that percentage. It's unfortunate because I think that it just hurts everybody when it looks like that, and it's really just a shell. It looks like that. It's not what people do. So we're trying to educate and do a lot more with that to help them understand that they are a part of our unit of teachers, and they're licensed that way. They are instructors in every way, and just because you make us put them in there doesn't mean that that's any different. And so we're just trying to educate them. Some of it we're winning, some of it we're not. And I do think that we'll see some of that change just because they'll make us. But we're gonna fight it tooth and nail.
Well,
So we'll see.
Those are encouraging numbers. So
Yeah.
all right. Sorry.
No, thank you. Karen, anything else for finance?
Right, so I apologize, I know I stepped away, I just want to clarify, just so that we know, was able to comprehend and accurately interpret what it is that you were discussing. You're referencing the ESSER spending.
Mhm.
Indeed, as you referenced, the state of Indiana states that there is a mandatory percentage of ESSER monies that have to be allocated and devoted toward our classrooms and classroom instruction learning loss. That's it. Is it 20%?
That's the mandatory threshold.
And the trustees, our board of trustees have indeed committed 60%.
Yeah.
And then as I hear you reference, and I know we briefly discussed this before, but that's pretty considerable.
It is when I talk with my peers, it isn't the approach of the masses, and everyone's chosen to do things differently. A lot of people, and the DOE warns us. I mean, I will just put this out there because they are constantly in every meeting that they show up. They are warning us about the cliff that is coming when those funds go away. And watch how many salaries you put in, watch how much ongoing expense you put in, because these really are one-time funds. And to just be aware that the more that you load them with ongoing expenses, the less sustainability you have as a district to
Hence
pull those
budget
back
concerns.
in. Budget concerns, yeah. So as we look ahead, that's something that I'm always trying to balance, because I don't want to see us use those funds in a way that we can't maintain and sustain. If it's staffing, we need to be careful with that. The original plan was very defined, and that has helped. It's hard to understand because it's a lot of money, and I think that makes things.
Well,
It's
I'm
not hard
guessing
to
one of
understand
the-
in a way that it's people don't understand it. It's hard to understand that in the future it's not there, and what happens then can hurt, and it can be
Well, we
be
were
hard
wanting
for
to
people,
really have a excellent teacher to student ratio,
Right.
and I feel like we put a ton of money towards that in order to get those numbers down. And district-wide, 19-1 was our, is that correct?
I believe the district average.
District average, which some of the classrooms that we were in really saw that. I mean, 16 I think was the lowest that I saw, and then the highest I saw was 24. Anyway, but just again, average being 19. And again, the teachers that I talked to were appreciative of that. So it's, I mean, I'm feeling like that's good to see our money go towards what we feel was really helping that learning loss by allowing teachers to have more interaction with those students during, because they have a lower ratio. So just
so we're just trying to monitor that impact
now,
because
yes.
it's gonna hurt all of us. I mean, and I do mean every one of us to see that go away if we're not smart about it. And so we just have to be thoughtful and understanding of that coming, because it'll be here before we know it. And that's the part that I don't want to get too reliant on those funds because they are really great and they are wonderful to have, but they will go away very quickly. And so it's just something I always have to keep in the back of my head, even though I would love to I really would love to do some great things just, with it that is touchy and feely and wonderful, but knowing that cliff is coming is really unnerving sometimes when you know that you can't permanently sustain it. So.
And then forgive me, I know that, again, as Mr. Slacker referenced, come July 1, he had just crossed the threshold of 16 years of service here amongst the Board of Trustees. July 1 marked the completion of my first year. And so as I'm still learning and definitely still asking a lot of clarifying and inquisitive questions, the second topic you all were discussing, I know centers around a conversation that we had several months ago back in the fall regarding recently the state had mandated from a salary standpoint. Can you put that in layman's terms, like a nutshell?
Sure. So some legislation was passed last year that states that schools will spend at least 45% of their budget on teacher salaries, and that in a given year they're not to spend, they are to spend $1 more each year. And then there are some qualifiers that schools can apply for waivers if they can't meet those thresholds for certain circumstances. So student loss is an example. A lot of retirees versus there's some things with that turnover creates some ways that waiver becomes effective.
And so for such corporations, I apologize to interject, but for those corporations, that's where they at times are challenged to
Correct.
meet the 45%.
Correct. Some aren't there yet. some are struggling to even get there. And
And I apologize, we're not in that category.
no, we're not. We're there, and our percentage looks really good right now. What I don't want us to rely on is that will shift as legislators continue to change how you have to show salaries, how you have to designate certain groups of staff that are teachers. They have pulled out some staff that we know are teachers. They say they're not for that particular 45% ratio. But there's also a study committee going this summer on the benefit side of things, because what we all know is salaries don't stand alone. There's benefits that go with them. And what unfortunately people have jumped to start thinking about is, okay, if we have to get to the salary, do we have to decrease the benefit? Because that might be the only way we can get to that 45% salary. Well, that got legislators going, whoa, that's not what we meant. Well, then you need to help us think about this differently. So there's a study committee going to see if they did include salaries as a part and call it compensation instead of just salaries. What does that look like? Does that make that threshold percentage, whatever it would be, because they will change it, more attainable? Does it make it more reasonable to think about, knowing that they don't really want to see everybody strip benefits just to hit these thresholds that legislatively they determined, because that's a part of compensation that people really do need. And so
And I apologize again to interject, just so right now, what I used to say is we're in pretty good shape. The state mandates, we have to keep our eye on it, as I hear you saying, and we definitely monitor and make sure that we're continuing to take the proper steps to inform and educate the board so that they can ideally make the proper decisions to be in support of our educators. But what you're saying, 45% of the state mandate, and we right now are at.
We're at 57.5.
I think the finance committee, we spent a lot of time on this, and I think what we settled on is that's not a data point that we're going to use to manage the corporation. Because it shifts too much. It's not an accurate representation of maybe what we're actually doing in compensation. And so while yes, we look really good, they may not always be that. And so I think the shift is to maybe not utilize that particular data point as something we focus on or look at as the sole point.
The other part that the commitment, I apologize. I say this from the commitment of the trustees, as has been referenced and exemplified, is to maintain a high threshold as we move down the road. As far as
that's always our goal, is to try to keep it as close to that as possible. The other thing that we know, that I know, and the part that feeds into ESSER and where I was kind of going with that part, is that right now, all of the grant funds that have salaries in it are included in that percentage. When ESSER funds go away, if you have loaded a ton of salaries, because some corporations have done that, if you load a ton of salaries, it goes away and your percentage will automatically drop. And so that's just something, as I say, it's not hard to understand, but there's a lot of moving parts that we just all have to be aware of. And there are things we all would love to do, but we all know that they have different implications and impacts later when those funds go away that we have to be aware of as we're making decisions on those one-time funds. That
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at the time when the ESSER money was allocated and the board made the decision to allot more towards learning loss, that the thought process coming to the board from those giving out the money, amongst others, was that we could correct this learning loss in 3 years. I think in practicality, what we're finding out is it's going to be a lot more than 3 years. And so while the money will disappear, how do we as a corporation now have a longer term vision? Because the kids that are impacted most severely, it may be their entire career at RCS, from say a fourth grader. So those are more complicated questions and where that money goes. But I think initially, boy, we give them 3 years of extras, we'll solve the problem. Well, at the time, I think that's what people thought, and that's what we were informed. But I think that's proving not to be so much the case.
Well, I think too the DOE is coming to realize that when you give, well, and it's not just the Indiana DOE, it's the U.S. DOE. I mean, it's far bigger than just the state of Indiana. That when everyone's trying to do the same things, you have so many limits on what you can get, and so it just backs everything up, and it makes it really hard to obtain it without delay, and that is creating, I think, that additional concern in that 3 years and being able to, jump in and finish the task at hand because of other considerations. So it's been
Common theme.
it's been an interesting year, so to say the least.
Can we cruise on to marketing?
Hey, Mrs. Scout, thank you, ma'am.
Mrs. Stoltz or Brad? I don't know. Have we
I know
met?
that I also,
I don't
I
know that
also-
we've met since last time.
Oh, we have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we did.
Uh,
Communication.
We reported last
was-
time, I thought,
Oh, did
on
we
the
report?
previous meeting.
I know that right now, one of the things that Mrs. Hazelbaker and the working group has indeed been extending conversation on is making sure that, as was presented earlier this evening, that behind the strategic goals, that there's clear and concise communication, transparency as to the vision, as to how it relates back to the vision and mission, and indeed how we'll take the necessary steps to continue to move the corporation forward. I know that the next school board meeting on the 27th, we indeed have in store opportunity to not only reveal share with our community the strategic goals, but also we'll work to accomplish those goals. The other piece, and I'm not sure if I don't want to steal any of Mrs. Hazelbaker's thunder, but one of the other caveats that folks will be able to observe as they travel north and south on Hutchinson Parkway is the banner project that I know folks have contributed to, and with the grant that we were awarded, and Ms. Hazelbaker and others successfully wrote, it calls for us to celebrate the arts as well as not only from our
Student art, specifically.
student art that without a doubt that was facilitated and supported by our wonderful art teachers throughout the course of our corporation. So those are something that folks will start to recognize. And as we gear up for the 22-23 school year, I know that Ms. Hazelbaker and the group has also talked about different ways in which we can highlight, again, the strategic goals, the vision, mission, cadence, a lot of the uniformity that we all can support.
And we're gonna get a video from you every week, right?
Without a doubt, that's folks will come to see all of this hair.
I do believe that the artwork is at Q7, correct, Bridget?
For the new mascots.
For the new mascots. So, kind of waiting to hear back from them. Nicole, did you have anything else to add on marketing?
This is it, yeah.
Bridget does a lot of work for the corporation. Last item, Meridian Health Services discussion. Nicole, you had a meeting, I believe, this week?
Yes, yeah, the nurses have been doing a great job of communicating with us, and we were able to get both the nurses at the table, Dr. Wright, myself, and Meridian Health Services, just to kind of hash out all of the questions that we could think of, and all of the, not just questions, but okay, that answer has been presented, but what concern then do we have as a result? So talked about salaries, for instance, what's that gonna look like? And as they're not able to give exact numbers because every nurse is going to be different, what they're bringing to the table education-wise and years of service and all of that. But it did indeed sound like they would be competitive. We even had the discussion as far as like our current climate, the workforce climate. I was saying to the nurses, I would think you guys are in a favorable position because there aren't a lot of laborers out there. There aren't a lot of nurses. The rates are up right now, so to speak. So my hope is that if we were to look into if we were to proceed with Meridian, that our nurses would be getting more money for doing the same job, and possibly even better benefits. Those were some of the things that were talked about. That's not a guarantee though. So, I mean, that was part of the discussion. Anything else to add about the salaries part? Just,
as was referenced during the meeting earlier this week, just to piggyback, they indeed have particular formulas or indexes that they revert to decide as to where the nurses would fall within their compensatory package. But one of the things that, as Mrs. Stoltz alluded to, and one of the things that our school nurses were adamant about is that if indeed we explore the Meridian Health Service option, that our school nurses would not be required or relied upon to maintain any type of quotas per a privatization process that is found outside of schools. And one of the things that Meridian Health Service representatives were able to convey is that by no stretch of the imagination will our nurses, those who, if indeed, like as I mentioned, we move and you all vote in such a fashion that they will indeed not be required. It's not even part of the school site-based experience. I think of the follow-up and follow-through questions that were raised, I think our nurses also wanted to be assured that if indeed Meridian Health Services is put in motion and down the road they recognize that a change is needed or there's a concern, that the concerns will indeed be heartfelt and adhered to. And one of the things that the Meridian Health Services representative shared is that bi-weekly, the Meridian Health Services meet with the school-based nurses along with central office leadership, and knowing other corporations, they are communicating directly with the superintendent's office. And so there is indeed opportunity to review, reflect, and revise along the way. I think during that meeting, one of the other caveats is that was consistently repeated is that Meridian Health Services is not intending to come in and just swoop in overnight and take over. That's not their intention. Their intention, as was alluded to repeatedly, is to work in accordance with the school nursing team, the amazing school nursing team that we already have, to make sure that each building is still serviced to the utmost, and where there may be areas to improve upon efficiencies or extended care. And so, to Mrs. Stoltz's point, I think one of the things that our school nurses did state is that they would be appreciative. And again, Mrs. Stoltz, correct me if I'm wrong, but they would indeed be appreciative of knowing exactly where these next few weeks, or how these next few weeks will look, with the fact that students come back to us August 10th, we'll blink and we'll be here. One of the things as our school nurses, our classroom teachers, and others within our modus operandi, so to say, need is time to prepare. And I think that with our school nurses, what I gathered, and again, Mrs. Stoltz, correct me if I'm wrong, is that they would be appreciative to know exactly what these next few weeks would look like. And with that,
Well,
yeah, and so,
wasn't there also some positive things that were also, I mean, they were actually talking about increasing staff to have full-time at every building, correct?
that was one of the things that was discussed.
Yes.
And what they mentioned is that they will assess each schoolhouse and the needs of each school building. And if indeed we have been operating with one school nurse, say at Star Elementary School, and their assessment reveals that we actually need 2 school nurses. Just as I had posed the question during their presentation, and I posed the question time and again, as we all have posed the question, those costs are going to land on which side of the fence, and as they said, they incur those costs, but they assess the situation and make decisions that are based on high quality care, extended high quality care, which is again being experienced at our buildings. But a school nurse will be available in each school on a daily basis. I think as of right now, Mrs. Stoltz, we have occasionally schoolhouses that are not receiving nursing service daily. There may be, I think there's a split in some of our schoolhouses, whereas what Meridian has stated is that they ensure that indeed nursing services will be provided in each building. Now, it may be that as they are, if indeed this is the route we go, as they are transitioning into the district, they may have to split coverage. Half day a nurse, maybe a star, the other half, it may be their avail. But of what they've shared, they have a plethora of nurses that are at the ready.
Well, one of my main concerns has been just as we've done some of this outsourcing with Chartwells and, you know, they're supposedly, you know, providing their own employees and lunchroom workers, and sometimes that doesn't happen, you know, and then we're having people fill in and just thinking like, okay, I'm not wanting that situation again. Bus drivers, you know, same thing. And Karen's, you know, trying to find people to get people to drive buses, and yet we've outsourced that, you know. And so that's been one of my personal pet peeves about this whole idea. However, and we asked it several different ways. You know, I feel like she has time and time again said, we will own it. We will pull people from other areas. We will pull nurses from other schools. We will pull, you know, from other areas. She didn't say schools, if needed. So,
but they're definitely anticipating that they'll be filled.
Yes, they have
once in a blue moon.
time and time again
Yeah.
stated that they will be able to fill that.
I remember when we were at Muncie, we asked her how many
Yes.
times this school year have you been without a nurse
Right.
here, and she said 0.
Right.
That was her response.
Again, from the get-go, that's been a concern personally, you
Right.
know, and so for the 20th time, I asked it at the meeting, and she's been consistent in insisting that we own it. This is our thing, that we are gonna fill those spots.
And if
So-
I can also just add, I think with the process as it has played out, and our RCS nursing team has exercised the utmost of patience and resiliency when it comes to staying the course, and more importantly, providing candid input and feedback along the way. I think that especially again, being first year in this role, I was able to learn of all the great things that our school nurses have been doing for years, and how many services our students indeed, the community currently receive, and at times free of charge. Now, it's indeed, as we all understand and know, and humility is something that I try to model and live by. There's always areas in which we can be more efficient, but one of the things that I felt that our school nursing team was able to learn from this last meeting, we've met. That was actually the second time that our school nurses had an opportunity to interact with the Meridian Health Service reps. I know that we have met with the RCS school nursing team as an executive committee time or two. And
I actually have the timeline here, if you want me to share it with the public.
Absolutely.
So that may be good.
That'd be helpful.
I think it's helpful too to think about how this process works when, you know, new programs or new ideas are coming about. But December 13th, 2021 was when Meridian first met with Dr. Wright. March 16th, 2022, Meridian presented at the public school board meeting. April 26th, Dr. Wright and some board members toured Meridian Health Services in Muncie. May the 11th, there was a Google Meet with questions from the nurses from Meridian with Dr. Wright and nurses. On May 24th, 2022, there was a tour of the Meridian Services in Muncie schools with Dr. Wright, board member and nurses, school nurses. June the 7th, the nurses met with the executive committee and Dr. Wright. And July 5th, which was yesterday. Yes.
2 days.
2 days ago. The nurses met with Meridian and
Fifth was yesterday.
board member and Dr.
Sure.
Wright, some via phone, some in person. So that's kind of the time, a quick overview of the timeline, just so the public can understand that the process, this is as it's unfolded.
And throughout that, there were numerous conversations, numerous correspondence via email and text correspondence, the whole 9 yards. I think that one of the things, and I have apologized to our RCS nursing team. I know that one of the things as we are, and as we will continue to move down the proverbial road, thus is the process that we'll continue to implement is that process of collaboration. I think it goes back to the strategic goal of professional learning organizations, which are found at the district level, and you all being the trustees model that. But one of the things for sure is that the cart was ideally before that metaphor horse, and so bringing it back behind, I think, is what we've made an attempt to do with this particular process. And just in closing, I think our nurses hearing that their identities, because for our RCS nurses, many of them are institutions in and of themselves within their respective schoolhouses. They know the ins and outs of families, faculty, staff. They know older brothers, little sisters, cousins. Some of them now are getting the second generation because they've served in our district for so long, and hearing that they indeed would not lose their identities and still be able to participate in all the other extracurricular things that have embedded them within each community, I think was a reassuring topic of conversation yesterday. And so as we were actually, one of the things that was mentioned is that at this juncture, they indeed would love to know the will of the board so that they can best prepare if indeed it's going to be a partnership with Meridian Health, or we're going to continue to move in the fashion that we have and take from this experience ways in which we can
So I think there's one more point that is really important for everyone to understand, because it was a big concern of mine in the beginning as well, and that was security and isolation. The initial proposal talked about how that, each building would have its clinic, and they had talked about possibly going to an outpatient type of clinic where people, they would see external patients and that type of stuff. And my first thought was, in a lot of these environments, that's major construction if you're going to isolate the public from our student body and our staff. And I think it's important that the only adults that I really want Meridian Health Services to deal with are our employees. And they have since come back and stated that they don't have any intent of opening that type of a model. So therefore, we don't have to worry about building security and people being in after hours and those type. And I think that's really, really important. Along with that, one of the things that I think is important for us to also understand is any construction cost, any cost for equipment is all bore on Meridian Health, and we will, or they will, not we will, they will provide the diagnostic equipment that we can't afford to buy. That way, for those individual cases that become dire, they'll actually be able to have equipment that they could hook up directly to the child or staff member and actually have a doctor on the screen looking at the data, asking the questions. Not that we couldn't work out some form like that now, but that when I looked at the potential for reaching our student body, not to mention what we possibly could do with the staff, the potential of being able to provide much more of a higher level of service quickly to our student, I think.
Well, their whole goal is to see kids at the school. you know, and so that is something that we discussed, you know, at the meeting, just to eliminate any transportation issues, to eliminate any sort of parent irresponsibility in getting the kid there, you know, eliminate kind of those steps that can be eliminated. So in seeing them at the school.
And if to also add to, if you don't mind, I apologize, interject, when indeed parents may not necessarily have the resources and the means to provide that extensive care, that's something that Meridian had referenced, that they would be able to provide. And if indeed parents and families met criterion, it also be free of charge. Meridian, and also we learned are capable of going into the home. That was one of the things that our RCS nursing team was highly concerned with, is that initially one of the conversations that led us to believe that students could only be seen in the schoolhouse. And one of the things that we've unilaterally stated over the course of time is that if you're sick, stay home, do not come in. And one of the things that Meridian had mentioned is that they indeed have an arm and agents that go into the school, go into the home front to service and provide care for students, so that they do not indeed.
Well, they were talking about telehealth in that regard.
Telehealth is
because there was some confusion. Remember, it was like, so do they have to come into the school to, you know, to use the telehealth thing? I don't remember what it's called.
We were able to clarify.
Anyway.
We were able to clarify there at the end that indeed they do have an arm that can go in and all of this. I think the other elephant in the room is it's all with parental consent.
Everything.
That's only if indeed parents consent and you know, in agreement. But the advocacy that our RCS nurses exhibited, and the passion and love they have for their schoolhouses, the communities, the kids.
And the questions they were asking, great questions. I mean, I felt when Kristen and I went to Muncie, I felt like I had bombarded them with, you know, 500 questions.
Came up with every scenario, didn't we?
Yeah, we were talking about all kinds of stuff, you know, but then the nurses, they came up with a whole nother set, you know, and so it was really good to have everybody at the table to hear the answers and just to kind of chip away at the concerns, you know, and I'm not saying they're all chipped away at, but just to hear some solid answers and I just felt like there's a lot of potential there. And we did even talk about an exit strategy. What if everything goes south? What if we decide, you know what, it wasn't all wonderful like they sold us, you know? And just the fact, I don't know if everyone's had a chance to read through the contract, but there is indeed, you know, if we're not happy, we're out of here, you know? And so just there is an exit strategy. So if indeed we aren't content, if the nurses are finding this isn't, you know, what we thought it would be, and they are in dialogue with us, again, with these bi-weekly meetings, then there is an exit strategy. So
I'm glad you referenced that, because that was one of the things, as Mr. Sliver just arrived at, as far as, and that was with our RCS school nursing team, one of the things that they wanted to be assured of and be guaranteed of is that the students indeed would receive the highest of care. And in that, as they exercise humility, as they mentioned, in that, if indeed it is Meridian, then that's something that they would indeed be objective and optimistic to learn how indeed it would, but to also be assured that if indeed there is time to review, reflect, and revise meaning go a different route, then we just have to maintain and sustain that open dialogue and forum in which our RCS nurses can share if this is the route we go, what's really happening in each building. And we definitely will be adamant about that.
And I want to reiterate, it was truly endearing to see the concern that the nurses have for their kiddos. Just how they every every question pertained to the student's care, the student's well-being, what's best for the students. If they already have a primary care physician, what about, what's that gonna look like? And just all of the scenarios that were run were all about them being completely vested and interested in the kids' well-being. So I wanna just give them the accolades that they deserve for taking such great care of our kids. It was obvious just that they love our kids, so.
Do you or the administrative team have any questions left unanswered, or do you feel like you're at a point that you can make a recommendation at our next board meeting?
I'm confident, Trustee Schleifer, and forgive me with all due respect, I'm confident that at this juncture, I'm confident to recommend that the board, if possible, take a vote roll call. I believe I may have butchered that process, but.
Well, it'll have to be an action item, it'll be a contract, so we'll have to vote on it.
And one of the things that Attorney Cross had mentioned is that if indeed our Board of Trustees arrived at a conclusion that the green light would be given pending review of the contract, that indeed, even this evening, it could be decided that yay, the Meridian Health is the route we're going, and because on the flip side of it all, Meridian also has a particular timeline that they would exercise to make sure that they also are at their very best as we move into the school year, and with immunization.
But the board still needs to act on a recommendation from you. I mean, it sounds good, and I still haven't gotten completely through the contract yet, but I may have another question or two, but we should look at having some formal recommendation that you think this is something that we should move forward with at the next board meeting then. That way everybody understands it. Because the reason why I'm saying that is there's been some confusion. There's another reason. There's multiple reasons, but also there's been more legislation to talk about public comment. So if we're going to have an action item, we want to at least make sure that the public knows that this could be an action item. So therefore we can ask them to speak prior to the discussion and the vote. I mean, I just want to make sure that we cover that, because that's a fairly new within the last couple of months. Well, actually July 1st.
Right.
Is when it all came into effect.
So I just want to make sure. I mean, I'm fine. I just was making sure that we have the process, because we need to act off of your recommendation. We need to allow final public comment, and then the board needs to vote. I mean, it sounds favorable to me. I think one of the other things that the public may not understand too is the expense of the nurses' salaries does become an expense for Meridian, not for Richmond Community Schools at some point. I mean, there may be pieces of that where, that may linger, and it may not be all of them, all that kind of stuff. But, so when you factor in all the considerations, you look at student health and the potential to achieve a higher health standard possibly for our students. You look in at the cost. I mean, there's just not one factor that I'm looking at. So, and I think that's all part of it. So
to answer your question, without a doubt, as we arrive at the July 27th school board meeting, a formal recommendation to move forward with Meridian Health Services will indeed come from our office. For the time being, as I mentioned, I know that there are grant opportunities. That was another thing that was discussed yesterday.
Yes.
Meridian indeed can seek on our behalf as a school corporation that will bring in additional resources and opportunities of support. And I know that I have to get back with you all on the deadlines of those particular grants, but I know that was one of the things that Meridian wanted to be able to explore. Understanding that a formal recommendation and a formal vote will come later in the month, but there's some preliminary things they need to be doing. And again, with the
and I know
RCS
that
nursing
the
team,
nurses are at a point where they would like to see us
Make a
vote,
decision.
make a decision. They need to know, you know, what is next year, what is this coming year gonna look like? And I know, it certainly seems, again, I want to represent them well. I would say, you know, when I first heard about this, I thought, this is a great idea. You know, Meridian comes and absorbs all of our nursing costs, and that we don't have to pay anything, like, how, this is too good to be true, you know, type thing. But it's like, okay, well, and we're asking all the questions, and it's like, all right, this seems like a really good deal for our school. And then the nurses came and asked a whole bunch of questions. I thought, well, okay, now I'm not quite so, you know. But then once those questions were answered, to at least my satisfaction, felt like, okay, you know, I just felt like my my feeling about the whole thing has been, okay, I think this is definitely something we need to look into, at least try out, you know, see if it's a good fit. As we were talking with the nurses yesterday, the impression I got was that they were getting to that point, so to speak, where they're feeling a little more comfortable about it. I don't know, you know, you'd have to talk to them individually to see where they are personally, but just a little more comfortable with the idea of, you know, okay, this is what it would look like and this is what it would entail, but definitely wanting to have a decision made.
Well, let me ask one final question before we conclude this conversation tonight. Looking at it from a student's perspective, it sounds like the risk of our students receiving less health care is almost non-existent. So to me, that would be the most negative aspect, is if we're shortchanging our children in any form or fashion. Other than that, from our students' perspective, what's the next glaring negative thing that comes up with? I mean, I understand the uncertainty of the nursing on who's going to send them their paycheck, but I mean, aside from that, I'm trying to think what, I mean, like you, this is too good to be true in a way. Mm-hmm. What other negatives?
I think a negative would be the stability. Our nurses have personal connections with the students and, and their families, and so I think
I was
if they didn't stay, that would be negative in my mind. Or I mean, we need the stability for the students, I guess, and consistency.
Well, I'm making the assumption that they all stay. I mean, and I understand that being a negative, but I'm just talking about
the different connotations. For example, when we contract out nursing, is it going to be similar to other vendors that have been utilized in the past? And
like Sodroll turning up an hour late with the kids at school.
From a busing standpoint. Yes. I mean, or the custodial services may not be able to provide the adequate number of porters and custodians that are needed. And those are, without a doubt, as you mentioned, that connotation, that idea, that thought is something that, going back to our RCS nursing team, they wouldn't be able to stand for.
Because I'm just even thinking about the management of it from the perspective, and I know, the head nurse, she's been with us for, ever, and is very, very, very talented. But it's still managed under special education, right? I mean, it falls under
from a central office purview. Yes, and of what I've been able to gather this year, I think it's been housed in a few different departments, but right now I believe it falls under the exceptional learning.
So staying on top of the qualifications, staying on top of the reporting, staying on the top of the professional, all of that. That would be transferred to a more, I hate to use the word qualified, but
I wouldn't say qualified.
Well, that's what I say. I hate to use that word.
We're not in the medical profession. I mean, that's not our core competency.
That's not our core competency, right? I mean,
it's somebody
I'm not trying to take anything away from, our staff at all.
No.
Or Deb. I mean, I'm not trying to take anything away. I'm just talking from a central office perspective.
How do you manage your nursing services?
I mean, that's one thing less that's on our plate as well, right?
Well, and so lastly, I will say that one of the other caveats, one of the other anxieties that currently exist is, as it was well stated yesterday, is that right now our RCS nurses are indeed anxious, not necessarily
Oh, I can
knowing for
understand
sure whether or
I can
not
understand.
we're going this route or we're going that route. And as was also found out yesterday, as we know, a lot of times nurses can write their own check per se because there's such a need, a high demand, and they indeed have options to go elsewhere. But many have stated that they indeed want to commit to RCS, and if indeed this is a route that we're going, it would definitely allow them to be at ease and breathe. One of the nurses had stated that in talking with another colleague, they've actually lost sleep over where things currently are.
And you don't want to make anyone's job an easy.
Mm-mm.
Right.
Especially
And,
not nurses.
I mean, and to conclude, I mean, I guess it wasn't an action item. It's not on the agenda. We have received the contract, but I'm not comfortable having, I can't,
Yeah.
with no motion, there can't be a vote anyway, but I think Dr. Wright has given his intention to bring a recommendation at the next meeting. I don't know legally how much room you have to work toward that. I would confer with Mr. Cross, because until we vote on it, it's not a done deal, but I would anticipate a recommendation and a vote at the next meeting. Unless anyone has anything they'd like to add.
No, I agree with that.
Mr. Walton. I understand it's a difficult situation and I wish we had the answer tonight, but
Well, I'm just trying to think of, I wasn't trying to extend the conversation more so than am I not thinking of something?
Mhm. Right.
I just want to, but I also want to make sure that we have finality so the public knows exactly what we're doing and what our intent is, because I definitely don't want to be someone, nor do we want to be a system that brings things to the board unannounced and vote on it that has major.
I've not heard a board member say that they would object to doing this.
It sounds like it's going to be a favorable for the recommendation.
Yes.
So I would treat it as a hire that is hired pending board approval, to where Meridian would be able to start motion and getting their ducks in a row pending board approval next week. If I was in the superintendent's chair.
And I would run that by Mr. Cross,
Yes.
make sure. But all right, so I think we're
I
good.
don't know if you're going to go off of that or not, Dr. Wright.
Say it one more time, trustee.
No,
I'm sorry.
I'm just saying if I were in a different position here, I would say, our intent is to bring a board motion or a recommendation at the next board meeting, and the consensus I'm getting from the board right now is I'm not feeling any negative views toward it. So you can't tell them officially to start doing their thing, but if
There won't be a signed contract.
no, there won't be a signed contract till after there's a vote. So
Anything they would do would be at their own peril.
absolutely, it'd be at their own risk. But
And forgive me, I was checking on some correspondence from Attorney Cross regarding this matter that he had sent just yesterday.
you probably just said tell Walton to shut up.
Not necessarily. But yes, without a doubt, formally on the 27th, in due time, or between now and then, indeed, as Trustee Walton, many of you all have referenced, I definitely gather that there will be perhaps be a favorable vote to move in that direction. So we'll take that guidance and move with it.
Okay.
And now I'll read the contract.
Preview of upcoming meeting and events. Dr. Wright.
Uh,
Move us along,
I
but,
have
oh yeah,
something
board,
else
I'm
so
sorry.
fast.
Got a little anxious.
Yeah.
Mrs.
Go
Stoltz.
ahead. You go ahead. Okay. I just, it doesn't sound like we reported back as far as our meeting with the REA. Is that correct? I don't think, okay, because I missed the special session that happened between, and so I just wanted to report out, just so everybody knows.
Yeah, I don't know if that's, I think that meeting is, I don't know what the REA's view is on reporting out on that, but.
Oh,
I
okay.
would discuss that with them before we report out. Let's say if they're okay with it and comfortable, then moving forward.
Okay.
If you, I mean, it was not, I mean, that's the only, I mean, I just don't know.
Just
I
report that you
I would definitely make sure that they're comfortable with reporting out before we report out.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
But it did take place and it went well.
There you go.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
It was nice to meet with them.
There, I'll help you a little bit, Nicole.
I don't want to step on any toes.
No, I want to do everything legally. Okay, Kristen.
I was just
Don't
gonna
ask me for
quickly
legal
report that our partnership with Every Child Can Read, the Reading Academy, had their final parade after their summer with 147 students. I was able to go to the parade at IU East, and it was lots of wonderful RCS teachers were employed by Every Child Can Read this summer, along with all the students, second and third graders, who paraded through at their completion after their awards ceremony. So it was exciting to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in IU East, wonderful for partnering also with Every Child Can Read to provide the space and the facility and lunches, I think, came from Reed, and just a good partnership all the way around to help our students.
Do you recall how many kids went through this year?
147.
I mean, you already said.
Yep, second and third grade this year. I think this was our first year with
We did the lunches
Okay.
and the transportation.
RCS.
Yeah.
Way to go, RCS.
I hope so.
Served food
I don't
several
want him
times.
To,
It
I
looked
don't want him
great.
to get upset because
Okay.
we didn't.
Yes.
And just to piggyback on that, we stole a little bit of Mrs. Hazelbaker's bell
sorry.
ringer, which is not a problem. She may, Mrs. Hazelbaker may indeed be able to just reside from where she is. But yes, to your point, kudos to Miss English, kudos to
Yes.
yourself, kudos to the summer reading, the Every Child Can Read program. Had a chance to meet one of its co-founders, former RCS board member, Mr. Ahouse, who wishes you all well, and I have some personal comments to share with you after the meeting, Mr. Schleifer, that Mr. Ahouse. But nevertheless, to your point, Mrs. Brunton, I think
Time to get
that-
off.
I think that when you were able to, when you realize that our educators and other classroom teachers, the time that they devoted toward the Every Child Can Read program, toward our summer school program that was occurring there at Fairview, the fact that they devoted and committed their time and extension to the school year, it just again speaks volumes to what it is their classroom teachers, the commitment they continue to make. I think that of the leadership, not only with the science of reading, but also there at our Fairview summer school program. It just, again, the commitment to student achievement, which is, again, the direction we all are moving. And so, Mrs. Hazelbaker, bell ringer.
I just want to give you some upcoming events that we do have coming up. Saturday, July 16th, the class of 1972 will be hosting their 50th class reunion. Also Wednesday, July 20th, the Summer of Learning Conference at Richmond High School. This will be a free conference that's expected to bring over 250 teachers to learn more about technology, curriculum, and self-care. And also on Wednesday, July 27th, we will be beginning in-person registration. So we'll have students and staff back in the buildings beginning on the 27th of July. And then bell ringer, of course, Ms. Brunton.
Sorry,
That's all right. It's all right. All right. And I also just was talking to Mr. Jones. We had over 300 students attend summer school at Fairview this summer also. And that's not even counting Richmond High School also. And then special thanks to the RCS Administrative Service Department employees and our area contractors for their hard work on our facilities the last few weeks. Many of the projects are on time and moving forward at a great pace.
When's band day again, Bridget?
Yeah.
I know you told us.
I have that Friday, August 5th.
August 5th. Thank you.
And then the 16th is at the competition at Centerville High School. Friday the 22nd, it's at Jay County. And then Saturday, July 30th, it's the drums competition at Winchester.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Anything else?
And just to piggyback on what Ms. Hazelbaker mentioned, and not ideal because he's in the crowd, but kudos to, like I said, the leaders of the Every Child Can Read, along with our leadership there at Fairview this past summer, sacrifice they made to continue that. So, thank you, sir.
All right. I feel like we should give out awards tonight to our participants in the audience.
I know.
Doozy. Meeting adjourned.